Blake, a shy young man at Onsullivan Dragonar Academy, suddenly becomes the master of a rare dragon that can only bond with one person. That unexpected fate pushes him into the spotlight he never asked for. As he tries to understand his new power and the responsibility that comes with it, Blake's relationships with the girls around him, especially his adoptive sister and his own dragon, challenge his emotions in ways he never imagined. Between intense academy training and high-stakes battles, he slowly learns what courage, love, and the unbreakable bond between human and dragon truly mean. A dragon once felt deep concern after witnessing a boy who was willing to risk his life to fulfill a girl's request. Moved by his determination, the dragon took the form of a woman. She called the boy Blake and believed that someone with his potential should not meet such an end. Trusting in the strength she sensed within him, she revived him. The dragon woman carried Blake to a house. He gradually opened his eyes, though he could not yet move his body. She gently reassured him that there was no need to worry because she would take care of him. Blake felt confused about how she knew his name. When she embraced him closely as part of the restoration ritual, he was startled by the sudden closeness. She explained that everything she was doing was part of a sacred process connected to his revival. She then introduced herself as Navi and declared that from that moment on, she would entrust herself to him. Blake suddenly shouted and woke up. It had only been a very strange dream, yet it left his heart racing. That day marked the first day of the new semester at Onsullivan Dragonar Academy. The students gathered in the school lobby, and before long, their attention shifted toward Blake as he arrived. In their eyes, Blake was considered the most troublesome student at the academy. Many questioned how he had advanced to become a senior, even though he did not appear to have a pal. Some even mocked him, suggesting that his pal must be just as problematic as he was. Blake felt his temper rise, but Raymond quickly stepped in and stopped him from acting out. Raymond reminded him to control his emotions. Blake admitted that he could not stand hearing his pal being insulted. Soon after, Maximilian arrived and commented that Blake never seemed to change. He reminded everyone that they were now seniors, which meant they needed to show greater self-control. Blake understood and calmed himself. To lighten the mood, Raymond casually mentioned that he hoped there would be some attractive girls in their class that year. Blake found it amusing that Raymond made the same wish every single year. In the new semester, students who had graduated from the Unio's basic division would begin studying advanced senior-level material. Onsullivan Dragonar Academy was a prestigious institution that trained students to properly ride and tame dragons. The Saikoku engraved on each student's body symbolized their status as breeders and represented a contract with an orphan dragon that resided within them, destined to become their lifelong partner. The Saikoku also served as proof of their bond and functioned as a gateway to the astral flow. Most importantly, a pal would only allow their own master to ride them. That day, their teacher explained that the Knight Nation of Lautrement had received approval from the Kingdom of Chevron to become a dragon-breeding nation. Meanwhile, their country remained at peace with the Northern Zephyros Empire, which was famous for its advanced machinery and powerful magic. The teacher reminded everyone to uphold the Academy's core values at all times. During break time, Raymond advised Blake not to dwell too much on the unusual exceptions surrounding him. He wondered why Blake alone could ride another person's pal. Blake himself did not understand how that was possible. Suddenly, a girl approached and scolded several students who were chatting in front of the classroom doorway, saying they were blocking the way for others. The students quickly apologized and moved aside. The girl was Sylvia. Many of their classmates found her difficult to approach because she came across as proud. Sylvia was the fourth princess and one of the heirs of their Knight Nation. Her noble status and confident attitude often made others hesitant to befriend her. As Raymond and Blake walked down the corridor together, Raymond asked whether Blake planned to participate in the upcoming Ares Dragonar Festival race. Blake admitted that he would not join because he did not have a pal. Raymond then asked if Blake was still worried about his left hand. In Raymond's opinion, Blake's Saikoku looked incredibly impressive. Before long, several students warmly greeted Rebecca, a third-year student and the student council president. Rebecca was known as the strongest maestro at Onsullivan Dragonar Academy. She was admired for her elegance, confidence, and commanding presence. Raymond jokingly mentioned that he wished he could experience flying alongside someone as skilled as Rebecca, even just once. Blake responded by teasing Raymond for being overly dramatic. At that moment, Rebecca smiled in their direction. Raymond immediately grew nervous, worried that she might have overheard their conversation. Blake quietly stepped away, leaving Raymond to deal with his own anxiety. That day at Onsullivan Dragonar Academy, the students were taking part in a dragon combat training session. They were being tested on the fundamentals and their ability to fight as dragon knights without weapons. Blake apologized to Raymond because he had to borrow Raymond's pal Bridget. He hoped Bridget would be willing to cooperate with him during the exercise. The instructor reminded everyone to stay alert and avoid any serious accidents. Each student and their pal quickly engaged the opponent in front of them. Raymond looked genuinely thrilled watching so many movements happening at once. Sylvia rode Lancelot high into the air and launched a blast of magic at her opponent. Raymond openly admitted that the Ice Blue Princess truly lived up to her reputation. Meanwhile, Blake focused on defeating his opponent. He targeted the dragon's tail, clearly enjoying the challenge. He felt fired up as he maneuvered around his enemy, planning to circle it before knocking it down. Just as he was about to finish his move, he accidentally crashed into Lancelot from behind. Bridget immediately landed, while Lancelot reacted aggressively, prompting Sylvia to calm her dragon at once. Blake quickly apologized to Bridget for his carelessness. Seeing what happened, the instructor scolded him. He had already warned everyone to pay attention not only to their opponents, but also to the other dragons nearby to prevent injuries. Blake sincerely apologized again. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the instructor reminded him to be more careful. Blake then tried to apologize to Sylvia. Unexpectedly, she slapped him. Everyone around them was shocked. Sylvia criticized Blake and accused him of treating the class like a joke. Blake firmly denied that. Sylvia argued that accidents like that only happened when someone used another person's dragon. Raymond stepped in and explained that there was a specific reason why Blake was borrowing his pal. Sylvia knew Blake did not have a pal of his own. She harshly claimed that both Blake and his dragon were foolish, and she even insisted that his dragon had been gone for years. Blake could not accept those words. When Sylvia repeated her claim, he nearly lost his temper, but Raymond quickly stopped him. Raymond explained that Blake was especially sensitive whenever someone insulted his pal, which was why people often labeled him as a troublemaker. Blake demanded that Sylvia take back her words. She refused and challenged him instead. If Blake could defeat her in the Ares No Curious Eye, she would withdraw her statement and apologize to him. Blake accepted the challenge without hesitation. That night, Blake once again found himself in the same mysterious dream. Navi was beside him while his body felt completely unable to move. She leaned over him with a playful smile, clearly amused by his innocent reaction. Blake asked why she was acting that way. Navi explained that everything she did was connected to her awakening, and she intended to place her trust in him. She told him she would examine his condition, and that their connection required mutual understanding. Blake looked nervous, but Navi urged him to stay calm. She said that night would mark an important turning point for both of them, so they needed to face it together. The next morning, Blake woke up to the sound of his friends knocking on his door. He quickly got up and prepared to start the day. Later that morning, the students gathered on the field. Rebecca gave a briefing about the Ares No Curious Eye, explaining that it was not just an ordinary race. She reminded everyone that it was a long-standing tradition at Ansulevon Dragonar Academy, and the results would be officially documented. Those who participated would compete fiercely to reach the top position. She also announced that the winner would be rewarded with a full day spent with her. The students immediately erupted in excitement. Even Raymond asked Blake to return Bridget since he was interested in joining the race as well. Next, Rebecca invited Sylvia to speak as the student representative. Sylvia stepped up to the podium and briefly glanced at Blake before addressing the crowd. She encouraged everyone to give their best effort and not get distracted by the side attractions of the event. After that, she stepped down. Some students were surprised that a royal like Sylvia delivered such a short speech. It seemed that quite a few of them did not like her. A few even brought up her older brother Julius, who had once been known as a dragon slayer. Rumors said that he had been executed years ago for violating the kingdom's most serious taboo. Blake could not understand why people kept bringing up something that had happened decades earlier. Rebecca gave the signal to mark the start of the race. The dragons, along with their riders, charged toward the finish line at full speed while the crowd watched with excitement. Some dragons even took to the sky, flying ahead to overtake their rivals. Meanwhile, Blake was pushing himself forward from the back of the pack. Before long, he noticed that Sylvia was already near the front. Every participant was giving it their all to win. Blake saw a group of girls intentionally blocking Sylvia's path. He called out to them, but Sylvia told him to let it go, since blocking and teamwork were not against the rules. Blake moved ahead anyway and deliberately steered his dragon into one of them. He quickly apologized, explaining that the dragon was hard to control since it was not actually his. The three girls knew Blake had a reputation as a troublemaker. Because of the collision, they lost their balance, giving Sylvia the chance to pass them. As she rode past Blake, she made it clear that she was not going to thank him, but Blake did not mind at all. After Sylvia pulled ahead, Blake urged Bridget to go faster. The racers faced all kinds of obstacles, from steep cliffs to long stretches of river. Eventually, Blake found himself entering the forest alone. Bridget came to a stop, exhausted. Blake apologized to her, realizing that he should not have pushed her the way he would have with a seasoned maestro using Earthia. Even though Blake's race ended there, he felt satisfied. What mattered most to him was that he had enjoyed competing alongside Sylvia. Suddenly, Blake heard a sound nearby. He called out, asking if anyone was there. He He told Bridget to stay put while he went to check. Walking through the trees, he eventually came across the wreckage of an air battleship. Out of nowhere, a man appeared and explained that the air battleship had once belonged to the Zephyros Empire. The man was Mildhaus. He mentioned that the ship had been used in war. Blake was shocked to see an Imperial weapon in Mildhaus' hand. He asked whether Mildhaus was a soldier of the Empire. Mildhaus stepped closer and asked Blake's age. Blake answered that he was 16 years old. Mildhaus found it strange that at 16, Blake only carried a small dragon mark on his body. Blake was confused about how Mildhaus could know that, but Mildhaus claimed that he could see it. He also said that he himself was cursed. Without warning, a whip nearly struck Blake. A girl named Anya appeared and ordered him to get away from Mildhaus. Blake did not understand what was happening. He tried to dodge, but Anya kept pursuing him. He asked what he had done wrong to deserve being chased like that. Anya remarked that Blake was unfortunate to have crossed paths with them and brought up the subject of war. Blake was confused. As far as he knew, their territories were at peace. According to Anya, however, while things seemed peaceful on the surface, the kingdom and the empire were still secretly at war. Anya's whip finally hit Blake, knocking him down. She restrained him and prepared to strike with her knife, but she suddenly hesitated. Blake took the opportunity to break free and stand up. He could not understand why Anya seemed unable to finish what she started. All of a sudden, the ground beneath Anya gave way, causing her to fall. Blake quickly grabbed her hand to keep her from plunging deeper, but unexpectedly, she pushed him away, sending him down into the ravine instead. After that, Mildhaus urged Anya to retreat. Blake's body dropped into the depths below. As he fell, he wondered if this was the end. Suddenly, his arm began to glow, and a large egg appeared before him. He wondered if it was his pal. When he reached out and touched it, the shell cracked open. From inside emerged a young girl with no armor or protective gear, rather than a dragon. Blake was stunned. He quickly caught her and managed to land safely. He could not believe that what he had received was a human, not a dragon. Blake suddenly remembered what Navi had once told him in his dream. The girl did resemble Navi, yet there was something different about her. He never expected that this mysterious girl would turn out to be his own pal. Blake stared at his pal, and the girl slowly opened her eyes and looked back at him. Her face instantly turned red. Feeling embarrassed, she reacted on impulse and struck him hard enough to send him stumbling backward. She was clearly upset, believing that it was rude for him to watch her while she was asleep. Blake never expected her to be that strong. The girl then revealed that she was a dragon. Blake introduced himself and explained that he was supposed to be her master. To his surprise, she rejected that idea and confidently claimed that she was the one who would be his master instead. Blake was completely stunned by her bold statement. Between the Zephyros Empire in the north and the Kingdom of Chevron in the south lies the knightly nation of Lautréamont. The country is widely known as the land of dragon breeders because it has the largest dragon population on the Arcstrata continent. Although it is a small nation with a population of around 5 million, it is home to Ansulivan Dragonar Academy, a prestigious school that trains and educates dragon masters known as breeders. Both men and women who form bonds with dragons enroll there, as becoming a breeder is the academy's main goal. That night, Blake brought the dragon girl to his room. However, she immediately commented that his room looked messy. She acted freely, made herself comfortable on his bed, and told him to sleep on the floor instead. Blake had no choice but to go along with it. Later that night, while Blake was fast asleep, the dragon girl quietly slipped under his blanket. Blake assumed she was sleepwalking or acting on instinct. He was startled when she clung to him and began behaving in a way that left him confused and flustered. He wondered if this was some kind of harmless dragon instinct, similar to how a baby dragon might express affection. He could not believe that he had finally become a breeder. She murmured that Blake's presence felt comforting, and moments later she playfully nipped at his ear. Blake quickly asked her to stop, worried that her dragon instincts might get out of control. The next morning, Blake had just woken up when Rebecca and Maximilian suddenly entered his room. Shocked, he asked why they were there. Rebecca calmly explained that she only wanted to check on Blake's pal. Blake immediately panicked when he realized the dragon girl had just woken up as well. Maximilian was stunned to see a girl in Blake's bed and noticed several red marks on Blake's body. Blake insisted that Maximilian had misunderstood the situation, but Maximilian continued to scold him. Rebecca believed that Blake and the dragon girl likely did not share the bed inappropriately. Blake explained that the red marks were simply small bite marks from a young dragon's instinctive behavior. Maximilian then questioned why the girl was not dressed. The dragon girl casually stated that dragons do not feel the need to wear clothes. Blake quickly covered her with a blanket. Rebecca handed the girl a set of clothes and informed Blake that the academy had decided to place the dragon girl under Professor Angela's supervision. Professor Angela was a leading dragon research expert. The girl would stay in Blake's room until Angela completed the necessary preparations. Blake accepted responsibility for looking after her. Rebecca also told him to visit the records office to arrange the required expenses and purchase whatever the Dragon Girl needed. Later that day, Blake took the Dragon Girl for a walk around town. Everyone they passed seemed captivated by her appearance. She looked extremely satisfied with the clothes she was wearing. Soon after, she told Blake that she was hungry and wanted to buy something to eat. Blake was surprised to realize that dragons could get hungry just like humans. She mentioned that she had not eaten breakfast. Blake bought her a crepe, and she instantly loved it, even declaring that she wanted crepes to be her main food. Blake gently explained that crepes were just snacks and that a dragon should eat meat to grow strong and tall. However, she paid little attention to his advice. Suddenly, she began to feel weak and her body temperature seemed to rise. Blake urged her to stand up, but she could barely move. He suggested taking her to the hospital, but she refused. Overwhelmed by her condition, she leaned close to Blake in a way that made him blush deeply. The people around them stared in confusion at the unusual scene. At that moment, Sylvia arrived with Cosetta and called out to them sharply. She was shocked that they were causing such a strange scene in public and felt disappointed in Blake's behavior. Blake tried to explain what had actually happened. Suddenly, the Dragon Girl sneezed with incredible force. The gust of wind from her sneeze lifted the hem of Sylvia's skirt by accident, creating an awkward situation. Sylvia immediately reacted by striking Blake, assuming he was responsible. Blake hurried to clarify the misunderstanding and explain the entire situation. It turned out that the trigger was a creep containing Anthar. Cosetta quickly gave the Dragon Girl an Anthar antidote. Blake thanked her for stepping in and helping. Sylvia explained that Anthar affects dragons the way alcohol affects humans, so it should never be given to underage dragons. She could not believe Blake did not know something that basic, especially since they had already studied it at the academy. Cosetta asked Sylvia to calm down and gently reminded her that she had been looking for Blake. Blake then asked why she had been searching for him. Sylvia admitted that she had been wrong about the teasing remarks she had thrown at him earlier. She acknowledged that she had lost control of herself and ended up insulting Blake's pal. After apologizing, Sylvia walked away. Cosetta said goodbye to Blake and followed after her. Blake quietly wished that Sylvia could always be that kind and sincere. The Dragon Girl felt annoyed with Blake and became convinced that he had feelings for Sylvia, though Blake denied it. At that moment, Blake had the uneasy sense that someone was watching them. Afterward, Blake and the Dragon Girl wandered around town, stopping by several shops to buy necessities. While they were in a lingerie store, a clerk casually asked whether Blake wanted to buy underwear as a gift for his younger sister. The Dragon Girl, who had been changing clothes, stepped out and confidently stated that she was not Blake's younger sister, but his master. Once they finished shopping, Blake suggested they rest near a fountain. He asked if there was anything else she needed. Even though she was still holding a crepe that was not finished, the Dragon Girl asked for another one. Blake refused, reminding her that the last crepe had caused everyone to panic. She then said she wanted to be called by a name. At that time, she did not have one. Blake had actually prepared a name long ago. He chose the name Aiko, inspired by a pal from Rosa Maria, the first breeder. Suddenly, Aiko and the tattoo on Blake's arm began to glow. Moments later, Aiko said that their contract had been successfully formed. From that point on, her astral flow had merged with Blake's. Aiko truly liked the beautiful name Blake had given her. While in the restroom, Aiko noticed the shadow of someone reflected in the mirror above the sink. Meanwhile, Cosetta was walking with Sylvia. Cosetta admitted that she was happy Sylvia had been able to talk things out with Blake. Sylvia explained that she was simply following her family's rule about accepting one's mistakes with grace. They were both shocked when they saw Blake standing in front of the women's restroom. Sylvia immediately scolded him, assuming he had tried to sneak inside. Blake quickly denied it and insisted it was a misunderstanding. He explained that Aiko had gone in and had not come back out. They hurried inside to check. All they found was Aiko's hat and some Fafnir Dragonstone ash. Sylvia believed the Fafnir ash had been used to abduct Aiko. Blake suspected it had something to do with Milhouse and Anya. He rushed to search for Aiko, but Sylvia stopped him. She reminded him that he and Aiko were connected through their astral flow. Blake rolled up his sleeve, revealed his Psychoku, and asked what he should do. Sylvia told him to focus on the Psychoku and think about Aiko as strongly as he could. Blake concentrated intensely on Aiko. Before long, the Psychoku on his arm began to glow. Soon after, several butterflies appeared, visible only to him. Sylvia told Blake to follow them, as they would lead him to Aiko's location. Blake, Sylvia, and Cosetta followed the butterflies until they arrived at an old castle. The gates were locked, and Blake struggled to open them. Around the area, there were pieces of Fafnir stone scattered about. After some effort, Blake finally managed to unlock the door, and Sylvia and Cosetta followed him inside. At the same time, Aiko regained consciousness and was startled to realize she was being restrained by a woman. The woman was Angela, the same person Aiko had seen reflected in the restroom mirror. Angela already knew about Aiko and intended to make her the subject of her research. She questioned why a dragon would take on a human form. Aiko admitted that she was curious about that herself. Angela asked whether Aiko did not share knowledge while in her true dragon form. Aiko explained that her memories about that time were fragmented. Growing even more curious, Angela said that if Aiko was confused, she would examine her directly to learn the truth, mentioning that she planned to conduct a medical procedure. Aiko cried out in fear when she saw the surgical instruments. Blake heard her scream and immediately ran toward the sound, only to be stopped by another locked door. He tried to force it open but could not. Sylvia then used Crimson Express to blast the door open. They arrived just in time, right before Angela could carry out her plan to cut into Aiko's body. Aiko urgently asked Blake to help her. Blake immediately demanded to know what Angela was doing to his pal. Even though it looked like a kidnapping, Angela calmly explained that she was only following a request from the academy. Blake could hardly believe it. Sylvia suspected that the woman standing in front of them was Professor Angela. Hearing that name made Blake remember what Rebecca had mentioned earlier that morning. Angela was known as a dragon research specialist. At first, she had not been particularly interested in that field. However, after hearing rumors about a dragon that had taken human form, her curiosity grew. Seeing Aiko in person only strengthened her desire to study her further. Angela was confident that the academy would not allow Blake to be deeply involved in her research. Blake realized that the presence he had sensed earlier had been Angela all along. No matter her reasoning, he still believed she had taken his pal against his will, and he demanded that she return Aiko. Angela refused. She revealed that she was holding Fafnir's dragon ash in her hand. Sylvia questioned what she was planning. Angela explained that the castle was protected by an oracle field. Because of that barrier, no matter how hard someone tried to summon a pal, it would not appear. She then told them to remain calm while Aiko underwent her examination. Angela activated a spell called Dark Mother's Lullaby, a magic designed to put people to sleep. Almost instantly, Sylvia lost consciousness under its effect. Cossetti tried to support her, but she also drifted off. Blake struggled against the overwhelming drowsiness and forced himself to move toward Aiko, yet his body gradually began to give in. Angela remarked that Blake was incredibly stubborn. She stated that she had no intention of harming him, since she would never violate the taboo of a dragon slayer the way Prince Julius once had. In the end, Blake could no longer resist the heavy pull of sleep. Aiko, frustrated, scolded Blake for nearly giving in. She shouted for him to listen to her command. Suddenly, the Seikoku crest on Blake reacted, and he jolted awake. Angela was visibly surprised, wondering if Aiko's magic had somehow flowed into his astral current. Regaining full awareness, Blake immediately shattered the magic circle Angela had created. He refused to let her interfere with Aiko any longer. He was determined to take his pal back. Angela only smiled, admitting that Aiko truly fascinated her. Aiko felt relieved and quickly rushed into Blake's arms. She had tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Blake instinctively moved to hold her, but Aiko quickly pulled away. She firmly reminded him that she would never allow him to touch her carelessly. To emphasize her point, she struck him on the face, knocking him down. Then she smiled, clearly satisfied with herself. That night, Blake could hardly process how much had happened in a single day. He looked over at Aiko as she slept peacefully. It still amazed him that she was his pal. With a gentle smile, he brushed her hair softly, deep in thought. The next day, Raymond approached Blake and mentioned that something shocking had happened the day before. When Blake had been hit by Sylvia, it had quickly become the talk of the academy. Blake asked whether anyone was discussing the professor instead, but Raymond had no idea what he meant. Blake decided he wanted nothing more to do with Professor Angela. Later that day, Professor Angela walked into Blake's classroom and introduced herself as their new homeroom teacher. The male students reacted with obvious excitement at her confident and striking appearance. Even Sylvia seemed caught off guard by the announcement. Meanwhile, Blake could not shake the feeling that Angela still had not given up on her interest in making Aiko the focus of her research. That day, Rebecca was sitting right next to Blake, and he felt awkward because she was way too close for comfort. She said she wanted to stay close since they were technically dating. Blake started trembling from nerves, but Rebecca leaned in even more and playfully teased him by blowing near his ear. He asked her to give him some space, yet she kept insisting that she really liked being around him. His face turned bright red the moment he heard that. Rebecca's real reason for getting close to Blake was to persuade him to join the student council. That same day, Sylvia was giving Lancelot a drink. She felt deeply grateful to him because, thanks to their bond, she had grown into a maestro and earned the opportunity to become a dragon knight. Her next goal was to become an Arc Dragonar. She had once promised her childhood friend that she would achieve that dream. Sylvia saw Blake as a troublemaker who somehow managed to ride other people's pals, and she could not figure out what kind of technique he was using. Suddenly, people started shouting that a dragon was going out of control. Sylvia immediately ran toward the commotion. She saw several people trying to calm down a young Strata dragon that had suddenly become restless. Meanwhile, Blake refused Rebecca's invitation to join the student council. Rebecca explained that the suspicious person Blake had encountered in the forest might be a spy from the Zephyros Empire. She suspected that Ansulevon Dragonar Academy could be the target. Rebecca then brought up the war that happened 52 years ago, when the Zephyros Empire mistakenly believed that the Academy was a military supply base. She was determined not to let anyone from the Empire act recklessly again, which was why she needed Blake's help as a member of the student council. She hoped he would seriously consider her offer. Out of nowhere, a level 2 alert alarm rang out. They looked out the window and saw Sylvia trying to calm the dragon on her own. Blake wondered why she would take such a risky approach. Rebecca guessed that Sylvia did not want to lose to Blake. Her assumption was not random, since she knew Sylvia was a perfectionist who hated losing. It seemed likely that she could not accept the idea of a classmate being able to ride any dragon. Rebecca rushed down to help. She called her pal, Huhiran, and activated her arc. After her appearance transformed, she quickly stepped in and successfully helped stabilize the situation, making sure Sylvia was safe. Later that afternoon, Blake accompanied Aiko as she enjoyed her favorite creeps. He was still thinking about how Rebecca had managed to help Sylvia, even though Sylvia looked clearly frustrated afterward. Blake never expected that Sylvia would see him as a rival. Because he was so lost in thought, he ended up ignoring Aiko. Annoyed, she tugged at his ear to get his attention. Aiko noticed a crowd gathering nearby and asked what was going on. Blake explained that they were tourists admiring the statue of St. Durham. Durham Lautrement was the first paladin and had lived 500 years ago. Aiko recognized that the armor Durham wore was an arc, since the blueprints were stored in Dragweiss. The remaining blueprints from her ancestors were only kept as reference materials. Blake casually asked if Aiko would ever consider creating an original arc for him. Her face instantly turned red when she heard that. However, he quickly added that she would need to become a true maestro first. Aiko strongly objected, wondering why she should create an arc for her own partner, especially when such a gesture carried deep meaning among dragons. Blake was confused by her sudden reaction. He had learned in class that for dragons, blessing an arc meant offering everything to their master. Hearing that explanation made Aiko step firmly on his foot, leaving him wincing in pain. Not far away, a girl had been watching them the entire time. She quickly ran off and hid. The girl was Enya, and she had not expected to run into Blake again. She felt uncertain about how she should report this to Mildhaus. Soon after, Rebecca and Sylvia approached Blake and Aiko. Rebecca invited them to Ryugati, a restaurant famous for its exceptional service and unbeatable flavors. She mentioned that the place offered a 50% discount exclusively for student council members. Aiko immediately showed interest in the delicious dishes laid out on the table. Blake wondered why Rebecca was together with Sylvia. It turned out that this was the date Rebecca had promised to the winner of the Ares no Curiosity Festival. As the winner, Sylvia had to fulfill her obligation. Rebecca sensed that something was still bothering Sylvia and encouraged her to talk about it right there. However, Sylvia simply pouted, clearly not ready to open up. At that moment, Enya was with Mildhaus, but her mind kept drifting back to Blake after what had happened earlier that afternoon. Mildhaus noticed that she seemed distracted and asked what she was thinking about. Enya acted like nothing was wrong and brushed it off. Mildhaus then asked about the condition of the city. According to Enya, everything looked normal. It even seemed like people had already forgotten about the war. Mildhaus felt that in this city, there was no real intention to turn dragons into weapons. Ansulevon was known as a friendly place, yet to him, that kindness felt almost too perfect to be believable. Without warning, Mildhaus drew his sword and summoned a massive dragon. In an instant, the sky darkened as a magical circle spread across it. At the same time, Aiko sensed that something terrible was about to happen. That night, people ran through the streets in panic as they saw the enormous creature looming overhead. Blake and the others rushed outside to see what was going on. He wondered if the massive being really was a dragon. They were shocked when parts of its flesh began to peel away. Not long after, the creature let out a deafening roar that shattered nearby windows. Aiko ran forward to confront it. With courage, Aiko challenged the enemy dragon. The dragon quickly restrained her with its tentacles. Blake froze for a moment, unsure of what he should do. Suddenly, another magic circle appeared, and the creature unleashed a powerful attack that tore through parts of the city. Rebecca immediately activated her arc and blocked the assault, wielding her weapon, Gaybold. Her strike pierced through several of the enemy's magic circles. It slowed for a second at the final barrier, but Gaybold ultimately broke through and wounded the dragon's body. Blake thought that attack had defeated it. However, the dragon's body began regenerating. It launched another assault toward Rebecca, and she struggled to hold it back. She urgently told Blake to take Sylvia somewhere safe. Sylvia looked completely terrified. Blake tried to snap her out of her fear. Meanwhile, Aiko was still struggling against the tentacles that had trapped her. Blake felt frustrated seeing Sylvia frozen in fear. In his mind, a princess should be able to stay composed in a crisis. Desperate to get her attention, he gave her a firm slap to bring her back to her senses. Blake needed her help. He urged her to summon Lancelot so he could get above the enemy. He believed he had the ability to tame any dragon, no matter its type, and he was convinced he could tame this one as well. Sylvia thought he was out of his mind, but he kept insisting. When she saw Aiko being swallowed by the enemy, she finally called Lancelot. She urged Blake to climb on quickly so he could rescue Aiko. Inside the enemy dragon's body, Aiko was still trapped. The tentacles continued to restrain her tightly, draining her strength and making it difficult for her to move. As a member of the highest dragon race, she felt humiliated being treated that way. The relentless pressure overwhelmed her senses, and suddenly she found herself awakening in another place. There she met Navi. Navi explained that this was the resting place of dragons who had already passed on. She was a personality born to guide Aiko until she reached maturity. Navi warned that if things continued like this, Blake could lose his life. She showed Aiko what was happening outside. Blake was trying to subdue the enemy dragon, but he fell, and Sylvia immediately rushed to help him. Navi explained that while Blake did have the rare ability to tame dragons, that alone was not enough. At that time, he still could not defeat Necromantia. Necromantia was a dragon that had died and been revived by humans, and its weakness was the Ark. Navi described the place they were in as a crafting chamber created long ago by master artisans known as holy dragons. The Ark was one of their creations. However, an Ark was a suit of armor shaped by the will and design of its creator. Simply copying an existing design without true compatibility could put the user's life at risk. Aiko asked what she needed to do. Navi told her to find the blueprint piece that matched Blake's body perfectly and connect all the parts together. Navi had already obtained Blake's body measurements even before Aiko was born because she had always followed his dreams. Aiko warned Navi not to do anything strange involving Blake. Navi could not deny her intentions and teasingly asked whether it was really that hard for Aiko to stay calm when faced with so many blueprints. She also questioned whether Aiko had struggled from the very beginning to gather all the pieces meant for her. Determined, Aiko quickly began choosing the parts she needed. At that moment, Blake was still trying to tame the enemy dragon, but he had not succeeded yet. Sylvia explained that Lancelot was reaching his limit, and it looked like Blake's body could not hold on much longer either. Blake understood the risk, but through the astral flow connected to his Psychoku, he could sense that Aiko was still alive. As long as the light on his arm had not faded, he refused to give up and would keep fighting. Meanwhile, Aiko saw Blake calling her name and urging her not to lose hope because he was going to save her. Hearing that filled her heart with emotion. Magic began gathering around her as she carefully assembled the blueprint she needed to create an arc. Once Aiko completed the arc, she sent it to Blake. At that very moment, Blake collapsed after failing once again to tame the enemy dragon. Aiko hoped with all her heart that he would accept the arc she had prepared for him. Suddenly, Blake's body became covered in a magnificent suit of armor. Sylvia could not hide her amazement at how beautiful Blake's arc looked. Blushing shyly, Aiko insisted that creating the arc was not something special just for Blake, and that it was only temporary. She also denied that it had anything to do with loyalty, even though her reaction said otherwise. Blake sincerely thanked Aiko. With the arc protecting him, he felt confident that he would not lose again. He asked Sylvia to take him closer to the enemy dragon and complimented Lancelot for being such an incredible pal. Blake pointed out that Sylvia already had an amazing partner, so she did not need to try riding another dragon. Sylvia felt confused about why he brought that up in the middle of such a tense situation, but Blake stayed focused. It did not matter to him whether the enemy dragon was a god or a demon. As long as it was a dragon, he believed he could tame it. This time, Blake succeeded. He managed to tame the enemy dragon and soared high into the sky with it. From a distance, Anya and Mildhaus observed everything. After witnessing Blake's success, Mildhaus decided to leave. Things had unfolded differently than he expected, and while his research had come to an end, it was not without results. He had reached certain conclusions about the boy and girl he had been studying. Mildhaus then told Anya that it was time for them to withdraw. Blake soon realized that Necromantia seemed to have a master behind it. Without hesitation, he activated his magic circle and summoned the sword Aix-les Bains. With decisive determination, he struck the enemy dragon. In an instant, the dragon disappeared, and the dark layer covering the sky slowly faded away. Aiko's body drifted gently through the air. Blake rushed forward and caught her before she could fall. Their hands clasped tightly as they looked at each other while descending toward the ground. Rebecca and Sylvia felt an overwhelming sense of relief seeing Blake defeat the enemy dragon. The sky above the city returned to its bright and peaceful state. That night, Blake's friends held a celebration to welcome the birth of his pal. Rebecca reflected on what had happened earlier and admitted that the strength of the student council was still far from sufficient. Because of that, she invited Blake and Sylvia to join the student council. Sylvia gladly accepted the offer, believing that if she and Lancelot could help, she would never allow something like that to happen again. Blake also accepted the invitation with enthusiasm. Rebecca immediately decided to hold their initiation ceremony on the spot. Unexpectedly, the ceremony involved Rebecca giving each of them a quick kiss on the cheek as a sign of welcome. Their faces turned red with embarrassment. At the same time, Aiko grew irritated seeing Blake getting so close to a human girl. She quickly pinched his cheek and scolded him for it. After that, she invited everyone to raise a toast together to celebrate the new members of the student council. Back when Sylvia was still a little kid, she once found herself crying alone in the forest after badly injuring her leg. Not long after that, Blake, who was also still a child at the time, came across her. He told her that with an injury like that, there was no way she would be able to meet the mother dragon, so it would be better for her to give up. Sylvia refused. No matter what, she had to obtain her pal. She had already come that far, and turning back was not an option. Blake understood her determination, and he decided to help her search for the mother dragon together. That memory dated back to before Sylvia's 7th birthday, during her journey toward the orphan ceremony, the sacred ritual where the mother dragon grants dragon seeds to humans. Even now, Sylvia still remembered that moment. She sometimes wondered what that boy from back then was doing these days. That same morning, Blake accidentally dropped some of his belongings. As he picked them up, he noticed a dragon doll that had fallen from his shelf. Unfortunately, he could not remember anything about that doll. That day, Rebecca stood before the students and announced that she would be introducing 3 new student council members. The first was Sylvia, who would serve in the discipline division. Sylvia delivered her greeting and promised to carry out her duties wholeheartedly. Next came Blake, often labeled as the most troublesome student at Ansulivon Dragonar Academy. He was assigned to general affairs. Feeling a little shy, he introduced himself and shared a short greeting in front of his classmates. He admitted that he did not fully understand what tasks he would be handling yet, but he promised to give it his all. At first, only Raymond applauded him, loudly cheering him on. A moment later, the rest of the class joined in with applause. The third new student council member was Blake's pal, who had taken on a human form. Her name was Aiko. The entire class cheered when they saw her. Rebecca invited Aiko to give a short greeting. Unexpectedly, Aiko made an awkward sound out of nervousness, which caused the room to fall silent for a second before the students burst into light laughter. Aiko was stunned, her face turning red with embarrassment. She did not understand why things had turned out that way. After the ceremony, Aiko felt upset. As a proud member of the dragon race, she did not appreciate becoming the center of laughter. She expressed her frustration and questioned why humans behaved that way. Blake calmly explained that they were not laughing to mock her. They laughed because she was interesting and charming, and that was simply how they showed their fondness. Once Aiko understood, Blake reassured her that everyone wanted to be her friend. Aiko brightened up. She happily declared that she would not mind accepting them as her followers. She spun around excitedly, clearly in high spirits. Blake's first assignment as a student council member was to remove all unauthorized flyers from the school bulletin board. However, Aiko reminded him that as his dragon partner, she did not like seeing him ordered around by others. Blake insisted that he was actually her master. Aiko then picked up one of the flyers. It read Silver Knight Fan Club. She asked what the Silver Knight meant. Blake explained that the Silver Knight was one of the main characters in a famous novel titled The Sky Dragon Knight. The story was inspired by the Archdragonar, a legendary figure who once saved a city from necromancia. Elsewhere in the country, a cavalry unit was being chased by a dragon. The dragon continued launching attacks, but the riders managed to evade them. Before long, a woman stepped in to block their path. She was known as the Iron-Blooded Valkyrie. The soldiers aimed their weapons at her, but she moved with incredible speed and swiftly defeated them. That morning, Blake brought Aiko into his classroom. Raymond gently patted Aiko on the head and commented on how adorable she looked in her uniform. He jokingly suggested swapping pals with Blake, but Aiko immediately reacted by striking him in annoyance. Not long after, a group of female students appeared at the classroom door. One of them, Jessica, introduced herself as the president of the Silver Knight Fan Club, or SETKFC. Linade, the vice president, also introduced herself. They explained that they had never met the Silver Knight and were hoping to find clues about him. Jessica asked if anyone in the class had ever encountered the legendary hero who defeated necromancia. Sylvia promptly told them to leave since it was still class time. At that moment, she was not acting as a princess but as the student council member in charge of discipline. Jessica laughed at her, dismissing the role as insignificant compared to her own ambition. With complete confidence, Jessica declared that her dream was to build a future with the Silver Knight and have his child one day. Blake and the others were left speechless upon hearing that bold statement. Lynette suddenly called Jessica out, saying that her earlier statement had violated code number 127, which stated that SKFC must always be grounded in honesty, fairness, and beauty. Jessica complimented Lynette for recognizing the true meaning behind that rule. She then officially withdrew her previous statement, and Lynette accepted the retraction. Blake could not help but wonder what kind of performance they were putting on. Raymond explained that going against Jessica was basically asking for trouble, since she claimed to come from a pure noble lineage. At that moment, Lynette quietly mentioned that Sylvia had been seen at the site where Necromantia appeared, riding Lancelot. Jessica started to suspect that Sylvia might know the true identity of the Silver Knight. Sylvia looked confused by the accusation. Blake suddenly stepped in and told them they needed to leave the classroom because it was still school hours. Jessica was shocked that someone she considered beneath her would dare to speak to her that way. Out of nowhere, Rebecca arrived and pointed out that Jessica always seemed to look down on others. She had come because she needed to speak with members of the student council. As the head of SKFC, Jessica wanted information from the council about the Necromantia incident. Rebecca leaned in and whispered something to Jessica, and whatever she said clearly unsettled her. Soon after, Jessica stormed out of the classroom with her group, leaving Blake and the others confused. Rebecca later explained that Jessica was not actually from a noble family. For generations, her family had served the Randall household. Because Jessica often caused problems, Rebecca had considered exposing the truth about her background if necessary. Sylvia could not understand why Jessica felt the need to lie about something like that. According to Rebecca, Jessica was not a bad person at heart, but she was a dreamer. She was so obsessed with becoming a noble that she convinced herself she already belonged to that class. Rebecca also mentioned that if Jessica were to discover the identity of the Silver Knight, it could dramatically change her future. Blake asked why that would matter so much. Rebecca explained that in the dragon-breeding nation, becoming an Ark was treated almost like being part of the nobility. Forming a strong alliance with someone as important as the Silver Knight could secure a bright future. Sylvia looked stunned by the implications. Aiko, on the other hand, seemed confused about the deeper meaning behind the conversation. Blake felt it was better for Aiko not to worry about complicated adult matters just yet. Afterward, Rebecca reminded Blake to keep his identity a secret, especially since Jessica was surprisingly perceptive. Meanwhile, the main topic Rebecca planned to discuss with the student council was the upcoming visit from Princess Veronica, who would soon arrive in Ansu-Livan to assess the impact of the Necromantia attack. Maximilian wondered whether the visit was also meant for Veronica to see her younger sister. Veronica was Sylvia's older sister. The thought of meeting her caused Sylvia to panic. At the same time, Veronica was on her way to Ansu-Livan, accompanied by Glenn. She genuinely looked forward to seeing Sylvia again. For reasons that were not entirely clear to others, Sylvia felt deeply anxious about the reunion. Elsewhere, Anya was blending into the local community by working as a flower vendor. She had been assigned by Mielhose to investigate the person who defeated Necromantia, but the mission was proving more difficult than she expected. As she observed well-dressed girls chatting in the cafe, she glanced down at herself and felt self-conscious about her simple appearance. Since the news of Veronica's visit spread across Ansu-Livan, Sylvia had been noticeably withdrawn, which made her friends concerned. Cosette decided to explain why Princess Sylvia seemed so shaken. She asked Blake and the others whether his concern for Sylvia was purely as a friend or something more personal. Blake clarified that he was simply worried because Sylvia had fought alongside him and because they were both members of the student council. Cosette went on to explain that Veronica had never been chosen as a dragon breeder. To make up for that weakness, she pushed herself to become an unmatched sword master. She earned the nickname Iron Blood Valkyrie. From a very young age, Sylvia underwent intense training under Veronica's guidance. Those years were incredibly harsh, including survival training in the mountains. During one of those experiences, Sylvia once found herself face to face with a fierce dragon and was terrified. Veronica stepped in and threw her sword to defeat the creature. She taught Sylvia that if she wanted to survive, she had to carve out her own path. Even so, those memories left a deep emotional scar on Sylvia. Blake later described it as a profound trauma that still lingered within her. Blake called Sylvia and told her that he was willing to listen to whatever was on her mind, even though he honestly was not sure what he could actually do to help. Sylvia responded by saying that she must look pretty low if she needed comfort from someone like Blake. Even so, she asked him not to worry about her. Blake could not understand why she was acting that way toward him. Raymond thought that Sylvia was probably just pretending to be strong. That night, Sylvia was still feeling down as she thought about having to meet Veronica the next day. Before going to bed, she changed into her nightwear and got ready to enjoy a massage from Cosette. The scent Cosette chose was lavender, since it was known for its calming effect. Sylvia slowly relaxed and truly enjoyed the soothing treatment. Cosette had noticed that Sylvia had not been sleeping well lately. She believed that once Sylvia felt more at ease, she would finally be able to rest properly. To cheer her up, Cosette playfully tickled Sylvia and gently teased her in a lighthearted way. Cosette felt happy seeing Sylvia laugh, since it had been a long time since she had seen that genuine smile. After that, Sylvia was finally able to fall into a deep and peaceful sleep. The next morning, after waking up and getting ready, Sylvia remembered the promise she had made as a child to a boy from her past. They had vowed to become the greatest knights. That day, everyone had gathered to welcome the arrival of Her Highness Veronica. Blake reminded Aiko to behave herself when meeting Veronica. Aiko quickly told Blake that he should also mind his manners when standing before her. Blake encouraged Aiko to keep her emotions under control, and if she managed to stay calm, he promised to buy her a crepe. Hearing that, Aiko agreed to do as he asked. Blake then asked Rebecca about Sylvia. Rebecca felt that Sylvia, who had been so full of anxiety, might not even show up. Blake started to think the same thing and wondered if Veronica was really that intimidating. Suddenly, Sylvia appeared and asked who exactly was afraid of something. She walked forward with confidence, and the people around her showed their respect. She then took her place in line to welcome the arrival of her older sister, Veronica. Blake asked if she was truly okay. Sylvia looked confident and composed, and Blake felt relieved seeing that she seemed fine and no longer frightened. Not long after that, the vehicle carrying Veronica arrived. Her aircraft approached, escorted by guards, and everyone was amazed by the sight. At first glance, it looked almost like a royal warship in the sky. Rebecca explained that it was Veronica's personal aircraft, called Sylvanus. Blake was curious about how it could fly. Rebecca shared that the aircraft was powered by a special dragon crystal known as Millennium. A dragon crystal was formed from dragon fossils that were over 1,000 years old and could produce tremendous energy. Moments later, Veronica's aircraft landed right in front of them. Everyone stood tall and prepared to greet her properly. Veronica stepped out to meet them all. Blake could not help but feel awed as he looked at Veronica, the first princess of the Kingdom of Lautréamont. Veronica stepped off the plane and was greeted by a crowd that had gathered to welcome her. Everyone showed their respect for her arrival. She thanked them for the grand reception, then called out to Sylvia. Sylvia quickly stepped forward to greet her older sister. They had not seen each other in more than 4 years. Sylvia admitted that she had been looking forward to this day for a long time. However, Veronica sensed something was off. Without hesitation, she swung her sword forward. Sylvia reacted quickly and dodged. The people around them were stunned by what they had just witnessed. Sylvia complimented Veronica, admitting that she was not easy to fool. She then removed her wig, revealing that Cosette had been disguising herself as Sylvia. Veronica immediately demanded to know where the real Sylvia was. Moments later, the real Sylvia approached Veronica. She greeted her sister, though her body was visibly trembling. Veronica asked why her legs were shaking and, seeing Sylvia's anxious expression, even questioned whether she still deserved to be called a member of the Lautréamont family. Clearly disappointed, Veronica swung her sword right in front of Sylvia's face as a harsh warning. The blade cut through Sylvia's outfit, leaving her embarrassed and shaken. Blake and the others could not understand why Veronica would go that far. Sylvia burst into tears and tried to cover herself. Veronica criticized her, saying that while her physical appearance had matured, her strength and resolve had not. She wondered whether Sylvia truly intended to carry herself that way on the battlefield. Cosette quickly rushed over to cover Sylvia with a cloth. Veronica accused Sylvia of acting proud on the outside while still being nothing more than an ordinary young girl inside. She even suggested that Sylvia should give up her dream of becoming a dragon knight and live a normal life instead. Blake could not accept how Veronica treated her own sister. He questioned whether a noble knight's character included humiliating family members in public. He tried to step forward, but Glenn stopped him. Veronica told Glenn not to restrain himself because Blake was just an ordinary student. When she heard Aevsko call out Blake's name, Veronica ordered Glenn to bring Blake along. Meanwhile, Anya was at her residence. The Tantalus clan was still dealing with the aftermath of ethnic tensions, but thanks to Milhouse stepping in to stop the conflict, they were finally able to breathe easier. Because of that, Anya was willing to do whatever was necessary. Suddenly, a young boy approached her and called her Shamara. Anya firmly reminded him that she was now the head of the Tantalus clan and should be addressed as Anya. She no longer wished to be called by her former name. The boy informed her that the Iron Blood Valkyrie had arrived in Ansu-Levon. Hearing this, Everyone hurried toward the city. Anya left without hesitation, determined to stop Veronica. At the same time, Blake was instructed to put on a butler's outfit. Primrose was assigned to guide him. Blake asked what all of this meant, and Primrose explained that it was Veronica's order and was meant to be simple entertainment. She quickly ushered Blake along, saying there was plenty of work to be done. Primrose turned out to be rather clumsy and careless. Nearly every task she handled ended in chaos. Exhausted, Blake sat down in a chair and noticed a Dragon Knight book that told the story of the Silver Knight. He flipped through several pages. That night, Sylvia could not stop thinking about Veronica's harsh words earlier in the day. Blake was deeply focused on reading when his elbow accidentally brushed against Primrose's chest. Startled, he immediately apologized, explaining that it was completely unintentional. Primrose simply smiled and shifted the topic to the Silver Knight, mentioning how impressive he was, especially when he used ice magic to freeze a mechanical dragon until it could no longer move. Primrose later informed Blake that Veronica had returned and wanted to see him. Blake soon found himself in the changing room with several girls who were getting ready to head to the bath. Primrose noticed how awkward he seemed and told him to change quickly. Blake begged to be excused, but Primrose insisted, reminding him that Veronica was already waiting. In the confusion, Primrose accidentally fumbled with her own outfit instead. Blake quickly turned away, flustered by the situation. The maids efficiently prepared Blake so he could join the others. Rebecca and Angela had already finished changing and headed toward the warm bath inside Sylvanus. Blake tried to resist the maids who were hurrying him along, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden situation. That evening, they all soaked together in the bath with Veronica. She asked them to recount the incident involving necromancia. Rebecca shared her suspicion that the perpetrator might be connected to the Empire. Angela explained that necromancia was a fusion of magic and machinery. As everyone knew, advanced machinery was the specialty of the Zephyros Empire, but without solid proof, it was difficult to confirm anything. Blake then wondered aloud why he had to join the bath as well. Veronica seemed puzzled by his question and asked whether bathing together bothered him. Blake clarified that he did not mean it that way. Aiko appeared to be enjoying the warm water, but suddenly she began to feel faint and slipped under the surface. Primrose admitted that she had added a fragrant anther solution to the bath. Realizing what was happening, Blake quickly supported Aiko, knowing that she would become weak from the substance. Veronica was surprised to learn that a pair of beginners like Blake and Aiko had defeated necromancia. She had already heard about Aiko, the young dragon who built her own art from whatever materials she could find, and about Blake, the boy who had the rare ability to ride any dragon. Not long after, Sylvia arrived to answer Veronica's invitation. She was genuinely surprised to see Blake and the others already there. Primrose and Cosette looked happy to reunite with everyone. It turned out that Primrose was Cosette's older sister. The two of them gently fanned Aiko, who was still unconscious. Veronica explained that her visit to Aunt Sullivan was not just ceremonial. She had actually come with a marriage proposal. After their older brother Julius was executed for killing a dragon, the future of their noble bloodline became uncertain. Veronica insisted that Sylvia, who was already 16, should soon bear a healthy child to secure their family's lineage. Rebecca asked why Veronica, as the first princess, did not take on that responsibility herself. Veronica calmly replied that she was only interested in the military. She expressed disappointment over Julius' reckless actions, which had brought shame upon their house. Sylvia believed that Veronica must have her own reasons. Veronica then revealed that Sylvia's prospective fiancé was Julius' former companion Glenn. She assured Sylvia that she would find happiness with him. However, Sylvia shared that she still dreamed of becoming an Archdragonar alongside Lancelot. Veronica pointed out that Sylvia's results had consistently fallen short. Blake pushed back against Veronica's statement. In his view, if Sylvia had not been the one to summon Lancelot, he would never have been able to ride necromancia. Veronica questioned whether Blake saw Sylvia as nothing more than someone who followed his lead. Naturally, Blake denied that idea. Veronica dismissed Sylvia's dreams and ambitions as unrealistic. Blake responded that Sylvia was capable of admitting her mistakes and always worked hard. He believed Veronica simply had not witnessed her true potential yet. Hearing that, Veronica challenged Sylvia to prove the strength of her small but determined dream in the dragon match, held to welcome Veronica the next day. Sylvia accepted the challenge without hesitation. The next day, a crowd gathered to watch the dragon match held in Veronica's honor. Aiko wished she could participate, but she had been born in human form. Veronica explained that dragons were highly intelligent beings, and there must be a deeper reason why Aiko had taken on a human appearance. She believed Aiko would understand the truth someday. The match began smoothly, and Sylvia performed well throughout the game. Even Blake admitted that her performance was impressive. However, just as Sylvia carried the ball and advanced toward her opponent, a sudden magic circle appeared and struck her. sending her flying backward. Seeing this, Blake rushed to help her. Sylvia lay unconscious on the field. That night, Sylvia slowly opened her eyes and found herself in her bed. Blake asked if she was feeling all right. Sylvia wondered why Blake was in her room. Cosette explained that Blake had carried her there because he had been worried about her condition. Blake admitted that he had been concerned. Although Lancelot was powerful, facing Cuchulainn head-on had been far too risky. Sylvia had wanted to prove her determination as a Dragonar knight in front of Veronica, yet she felt she had failed even as Lancelot's master. Blake encouraged her not to put herself down like that. Sylvia quietly believed that Lancelot might have been better suited to Veronica. A knock interrupted them. Rebecca entered, accompanied by Glenn. He stepped inside and asked about Sylvia's condition. Glenn explained that he had come under Veronica's orders. He also informed them that Veronica would tour the city at noon the following day. Sylvia assumed she would be assigned to accompany her sister, but instead, Veronica had ordered her to visit Valeria to offer prayers of repentance. Glenn added that Veronica was disappointed with Sylvia's performance. In her view, Sylvia's tactics had been too straightforward and reckless, revealing how unprepared her ambitions still were. He also conveyed that Veronica had instructed Sylvia to go alone, without bringing anyone with her. After delivering the message, Glenn prepared to leave. Before he could, Sylvia asked whether he knew about the marriage proposal and whether he was willing to accept her as his wife. Glenn answered that if it was Veronica's wish, then he would comply. Blake questioned Glenn's attitude, pointing out that marriage was not something trivial. Glenn calmly stated that his master's orders were absolute. Blake then asked whether Glenn would even give his life if Veronica commanded it. Glenn answered without hesitation that he would. Blake could not understand why Glenn allowed himself to be treated like a puppet, and he wondered whether Glenn had any desires of his own. Glenn suggested that Blake might be too proud of his past achievements. While he acknowledged Blake's skill and good fortune, he reminded him to remember his position. After saying that, Glenn quietly left the room. Blake was seriously annoyed by Glenn's attitude. Sylvia explained that Glenn had not always been like that. 10 years ago, when Julius was executed for killing a dragon, Glenn fell into deep grief and his personality changed completely. He became distant and withdrawn. The one person who pulled him out of that darkness was Veronica. It was clear that Veronica held a powerful position, high enough to command knights like Glenn. Rebecca mentioned that the student council would be holding a meeting the next morning to discuss the royal city tour. She reminded Blake not to show up late. Sylvia then wondered about her own role. Rebecca felt that, given Sylvia's current condition, it would be difficult to assign her any student council responsibilities. If Sylvia had any objections, she would need to take the matter up with Veronica directly. The next morning, Blake headed to the student council room for the meeting about the royal tour. As soon as he knocked on the door, Aiko suddenly appeared and ran straight into him. Blake had no idea what she was doing. Aiko admitted that she could not handle it anymore. She said she felt extremely warm and acted unusually clingy toward him. Blake caught the scent of anther on Aiko's body and asked her to show him what she had in her mouth. Aiko misunderstood and lifted her skirt, even though Blake only meant for her to open her mouth. Blake quickly realized that the candy in Aiko's mouth was likely the source of the problem. He asked her to hand it over. Instead, Aiko impulsively pressed her lips against his and transferred the candy onto his tongue. Blake was completely caught off guard. At that exact moment, Rebecca saw them and assumed they were hiding some kind of secret relationship. She also pointed out that the underwear Aiko was wearing belonged to her. Rebecca then told Blake to come inside. She explained that the vice president and the secretary were both absent that day, so only Rebecca, Blake, and Maximilian would be attending the meeting. She went on to say that they would be accompanying Veronica during her city tour. However, intelligence reports suggested that a suspect had infiltrated Ansu-Livan. Rebecca also reminded them about the assassination attempt against Veronica 5 years earlier, which had been successfully stopped. The suspect had been on the run ever since. The person behind it was a former mountain guerrilla extremist known as Avdaka, who was called the Judge. Later that afternoon, the workers were surprised by Veronica's sudden visit. Veronica calmly told them to continue their work as usual. Blake was convinced that among the crowd, someone could be a disguised extremist. Rebecca noticed that Blake looked nervous. Meanwhile, Aiko was shocked to see that her favorite crepe shop had been demolished. Blake told Aiko to prepare her arc in case the situation took a turn for the worse. Aiko agreed, but only if Blake promised to rebuild the crepe shop someday. Blake assured her that he would at least buy her plenty of crepes later. At that moment, the bells of Street Valeria Church rang through the air. Sylvia wondered whether everything was truly all right. She was inside the church, praying and asking for forgiveness for her pride and past mistakes. While she was deep in prayer, she overheard Jessica praying nearby. Jessica was hoping that one day she would be blessed with a child from the Silver Knight. Sylvia was confused about why Jessica would make such a request in a sacred place. Jessica insisted that she was simply praying for a healthy pregnancy in the future. Sylvia felt that Jessica's approach was misguided, especially since Saint Valeria was known for her compassion and forgiveness. Jessica arrogantly remarked that nobles like Sylvia probably would not understand such concerns. She then added that Sylvia would never be able to rival Veronica. Suddenly, a dragon burst into the church. The dragon was ridden by Avduka, who arrived alongside her followers, ready to confront the people inside. Avduka arrived at St. Valeria Church with the intent to launch an attack, and thick smoke could already be seen rising from outside the building. Blake was overwhelmed with worry about Sylvia's safety. Glenn suggested that Veronica return to Sylvanus to prepare their next move. As Veronica stepped away, Blake questioned whether they were not concerned about Sylvia, since she might still be inside the church. Veronica reassured him that there was no need to panic. From that moment on, the magic airship Sylvanus would serve as their central command for strategic planning. Once they arrived aboard Sylvanus, an incoming communication signal from St. Valeria came through. Veronica immediately ordered her team to connect it. As she had expected, the caller was Avduka. Blake was stunned when he saw Avduka, the very person Rebecca had previously described. Veronica calmly asked what Avduka wanted and why she had attacked the church. She also questioned whether Avduka was still targeting her. Avduka admitted it without hesitation. To prove her point, she revealed that Jessica had been taken hostage. Avduka had planted imperial mechanical bombs throughout the church and was holding the worshippers captive. The bombs could detonate at any moment, reducing the entire building to rubble. Avduka explained that she disliked waiting. Each time the church bell rang, a life would be lost. The next chime would sound in less than an hour, and she intended to watch it happen. Veronica refused to surrender. She made it clear that if necessary, Sylvanus had the firepower to destroy the church entirely. Blake was shocked by how far she was willing to go. Veronica advised him not to let his emotions cloud his judgment. Meanwhile, Avduka ordered her subordinates to stay alert, aware that Veronica might be planning something unexpected. Inside the church, Sylvia was drowning in guilt over Jessica's situation. Earlier, Jessica had urged Sylvia to remain calm. If Avduka discovered that Sylvia was her younger sister, things could spiral out of control. Sylvia had wanted to give herself up, but Jessica firmly stopped her. She understood Sylvia's good intentions, yet she refused to let her sacrifice herself. Jessica then revealed that she came from the noble La Tremont family. She demanded that the captors promise not to harm the other hostages. Although Avduka had never heard of the family name, she believed Jessica's claim and immediately singled her out. Jessica was restrained and suspended above the others as a warning. Sylvia believed Jessica possessed far greater insight and composure than most nobles, especially compared to herself. Anya was also among the hostages. If she had revealed her connection to Tantalos, she might have secured her own release. However, she chose to remain silent. At one point, a baby nearby began to fuss, but Anya gently soothed the child until the baby smiled again. She had come to the city searching for a friend, only to find herself caught in this dangerous crisis. Veronica initially considered launching a direct assault, but Blake objected. Rebecca then proposed a bold alternative plan, which Veronica approved. After finalizing the strategy, Blake prepared to head to the church. Veronica announced that Blake would act as their negotiator. Aiko immediately protested, questioning why Blake had to be sent into such a dangerous situation. Rebecca explained that the enemy was unaware of Blake's power, which rivaled that of an Archdragonar. While Blake stalled for time, the Archdragonars would move through an underground route and enter the church by breaking through its foundation. Blake agreed to the plan, and preparations began at once. Before leaving, Blake asked Aiko for help with the next arc she needed to create. Aiko doubted whether she could pull it off, but Blake reassured her that he trusted her completely. Encouraged by his faith in her, Aiko agreed, on the condition that Blake would treat her to 3 crepes afterward. When Blake arrived at the church entrance, he announced that he had been sent to negotiate. The enemy opened the doors and escorted him inside to face Avduka. Sylvia and Jessica were shocked to see him there. Avduka felt insulted that Veronica had sent someone as young as Blake to negotiate. Blake informed her that Sylvanus cannons were already aimed at the church, and Veronica had no intention of yielding to terrorism. Hearing this, the hostages grew visibly anxious. Avduka mocked Blake's approach, suggesting that he lacked skill in negotiation. Blake warned her not to provoke unnecessary anger or escalate the situation further. Avduka responded with a faint smile and revealed that she was searching for her missing younger sister. She wanted Veronica to experience the same pain of losing a sister that she had endured. At that point, Blake realized that Avduka was not someone who could be reasoned with. He silently hoped Aiko would finish preparing the ark soon. Back on Sylvanus, Aiko struggled with assembling the ark. It was far more complicated than she expected. Navi suggested combining it directly with Aiko's original arc instead of building a new one from scratch. She seemed puzzled, pointing out that Aiko could simply merge with Blake in her true form. Aiko had not fully understood that option before. Even in human form, she was still a dragon and Blake's partner. Navi encouraged her to awaken her true potential. Though still confused, Aiko pushed herself to complete the arc as Blake had requested, designing it specifically to neutralize the mechanical bombs. Meanwhile, inside the church, Avdaka began to recall where she had heard Blake's name before. At the same time, the baby in Anya's arms suddenly needed to be fed. The infant began fussing and crying loudly when Anya gently tried to calm the situation. Hearing the commotion, Avdaka coldly decided that the mother and her child would become her first targets. As one of Avdaka's subordinates stepped closer to Anya, Sylvia suddenly intervened and stopped him. Jessica was stunned, unable to understand why Sylvia would put herself in such danger. Avdaka demanded to know who dared to stand in her way. To everyone's surprise, Sylvia declared that she was the fourth daughter of the noble Lautremont family. She asked Avdaka to release the hostages at once. From a distance, Veronica and Maximilian continued observing everything. Maximilian could not believe what Sylvia was doing, while Veronica muttered that Sylvia was being reckless. Avdaka seemed delighted upon realizing that Veronica's younger sister was standing right in front of her. Blake shouted for them not to lay a hand on Sylvia, but Avdaka's men restrained him. Avdaka found it amusing that Sylvia spoke her name without hesitation, as if she had already prepared herself to face serious consequences. Sylvia stated that as a princess, she could not simply stand by and watch her people suffer. She was ready to face whatever came her way in order to protect them. Without warning, Avdaka swung her sword and tore through Sylvia's outfit, leaving her shaken and humiliated. Sylvia lowered her head, trying to shield herself as tears welled up in her eyes. Avdaka mocked her, claiming that Sylvia's true nature had been exposed and that she was nothing more than an ordinary girl beneath the title of knight. She cruelly suggested that Sylvia's so-called knightly spirit might as well disappear. Those words echoed in Sylvia's mind, reminding her of Veronica's harsh criticism in the past. At school, Sylvia always appeared strong and confident, yet deep inside she now realized how afraid she truly felt. She began to question whether she had ever possessed the spirit of a knight at all. No wonder Veronica had been disappointed and once told her to give up on her dream. Still, Sylvia remembered the promise she had made long ago to a boy she once met. She had sworn to become an honorable knight, no matter what. In that moment, Sylvia thanked Avdaka for forcing her to confront her own weakness. She declared that the fearful version of herself had vanished along with the slash of the sword. Rising to her feet with renewed confidence, she claimed to have been reborn. Blake and Jessica watched in shock. Sylvia firmly stated that she was an honorable female knight and a proud paladin. Suddenly, Rebecca and Glenn emerged from beneath the church. Avdaka's subordinates rushed to attack them, but Rebecca wielded her spear Gaybold to hold them off. Glenn followed with his sword, Calibold, swiftly driving the attackers back. The hostages quickly escaped to avoid the clash. Blake broke free at last, and Avdaka immediately lunged at him. He managed to dodge her strike. Avdaka's dragon moved in to attack Blake. Sylvia watched anxiously as the dragon prepared to strike. Just as danger closed in, Blake activated his arc and blocked the assault, straining his arm in the process. Aiko apologized for making him wait. With renewed strength, Blake forced the dragon back, sending it crashing to the ground. Avdaka began to panic. Blake thanked Aiko for her help, though Aiko casually insisted that she had not done it for his sake alone. Desperate, Avdaka ran toward the bomb. Blake chased after her, but she threatened to press the detonator. Unfazed, Blake calmly recited a spell and activated his freezing weapon, Bryanak. He fired at the wall first, freezing the dragon solid, then froze the bomb, and finally encased Avdaka in ice before she had any chance to react. After defeating Avdaka, Blake returned to his normal form and felt an overwhelming sense of relief. He had drawn inspiration from the legend of the Holy Dragon Knight. The former hostages smiled gratefully, comforted by the fact that the threat had been eliminated. Out of nowhere, Jessica ran toward Blake and threw herself at him, overjoyed to finally meet the Silver Knight. In her excitement, she made an impulsive and inappropriate remark about wanting to stay by his side forever. She even tried to tug his clothes. Rebecca quickly stepped in and knocked Jessica lightly on the head to stop her. Rebecca then lifted Jessica away and firmly told Blake to go check on Sylvia instead. Blake approached Sylvia and gently asked if she was all right. Sylvia felt embarrassed for having relied on others, but Blake assured her that she had been truly amazing. Hearing that, Sylvia's face turned bright red. Blake carefully carried her in his arms and began walking away from the church. As he did, Sylvia wondered why he was carrying her, and the moment stirred memories from her past. One night, Blake was sleeping peacefully when something suddenly hit his face and startled him awake. To his shock, Jessica was on top of him. She explained that she felt ready to start a family with him and kept leaning closer. Blake was confused about why she had taken off her underwear first. Without hesitation, she even began to remove her bra. Blake reminded her about her dream of saving her first night for a wedding at the church altar. Jessica said that for his sake, she was willing to put her own wishes aside. Blake asked her to let him go, but Jessica was overwhelmed with excitement and completely focused on her desire to be with him. The noise they were making ended up disturbing Aiko, who had been fast asleep. Aiko woke up in an instant, radiating intense anger. Within seconds, she used her power to throw Jessica straight out of the room. At that exact moment, Rebecca happened to be walking past Blake's room. Jessica landed right in front of her. Rebecca had already suspected something like this might happen, especially after realizing that Jessica was missing from the girls' dorm. She quickly covered Jessica with a blanket and escorted her back to the girls' dormitory. Aiko, still clearly annoyed, returned to her bed. The next day, Rebecca informed Blake and Aiko that starting that day, Jessica would officially join the student council. According to Rebecca, Jessica had likely joined on purpose because she already knew the true identity of the Silver Knight. Rebecca had also asked Jessica to step down as the leader of the Silver Knight fan club. In exchange, Jessica would serve on the student council to help prevent any sensitive information about Blake from leaking out. Rebecca then urged Blake to hurry, since Veronica was already waiting. Later that day, Avdokta showed up to meet Blake and his friends. Blake was surprised to see her there. It turned out that everything had been part of Veronica's strategy to teach Sylvia a lesson. Blake wondered whether Rebecca had known about the plan all along. Avdokta admitted that 5 years earlier, she had once been involved with an anti-royal group that attempted to assassinate Veronica. After the failed attempt, she turned herself in and eventually began working as Veronica's informant. She never expected that she would manage to fool them so completely. Maximilian pointed out that Avdokta looked different from the image shown on the flyers. Apparently, Veronica's subordinates had created the sketch based on rumors, and it had been drawn 5 years ago. Blake then asked why Avdokta chose to work for Veronica. The reason was deeply personal. Avdokta was searching for her younger sister Shamara, who was 15 years old. Blake was surprised to learn that the search for her sister was absolutely real. Avdokta made it clear that she would never give up until she found her. Thanks to Avdokta, Veronica had heard something interesting the day before. She played back a recording of Sylvia declaring that she would become an honorable female knight and a paladin. Veronica laughed at the bold statement, leaving Sylvia extremely embarrassed. Josette quietly pointed out to Blake that the name of the magical aircraft, Sylvanus, sounded very similar to Sylvia's name. Blake began to sense that Veronica actually cared for her younger sister in her own way. From that moment on, Veronica ordered her forces to capture the troublemaker who had been claiming to act as Avdokta's subordinate. Sylvia was surprised that the situation seemed to work in multiple ways at once, bringing both challenges and unexpected progress. It was clear that the road ahead for her was still long. Even so, Blake firmly believed that Sylvia would be able to overcome whatever lay in front of her. That afternoon they watched as Veronica departed and returned to her own territory. Aiko ran alone through the darkness. She kept running until she was completely out of breath, and when exhaustion finally caught up with her, she collapsed. Suddenly, something wrapped around her and lifted her off the ground, holding her in place. Panic took over as she struggled, unable to break free. Tears streamed down her face while she called out for Blake, but he never came. Then a mysterious voice echoed in the distance, urging her to put an end to everything. Moments later, Aiko jolted awake. She looked around her room, trying to convince herself that it had all been just a dream. However, she froze when she noticed red marks covering parts of her body. Shocked, she hurried to the bathroom to wash up. After cleaning herself, she returned quietly to her bed. Blake woke up soon after and wondered why she was up so early. Aiko hesitantly mentioned that something had happened to the bed. Blake immediately remembered the dragon excretion known as the Fafnir Stone. He moved to check the mattress, but Aiko quickly stopped him, clearly embarrassed. Blake reassured her that he would never laugh at her, and that he accepted her just the way she was. Hearing that, Aiko finally allowed him to look. To Blake's surprise, it turned out that Aiko had accidentally wet the bed. He had honestly expected to find a Fafnir stone instead. Aiko's face turned bright red with embarrassment. Overwhelmed and flustered, she reacted impulsively and pushed Blake away, knocking him off balance. One day, the owner of a small cafe looked visibly frustrated. 3 of her employees had just resigned, all because they were getting married. She worried about how she would manage the growing number of customers on her own. Their final advice to her, suggesting that she should find a man for herself, only made her more annoyed. She even compared her life to Veronica's. Although Veronica was also single, Veronica did not have to struggle to make ends meet the way she did. Anya, who had been waiting patiently, asked about her job application. The cafe owner gladly accepted her. Anya was thrilled and promised to do her best in the kitchen. However, the owner quickly decided that keeping Anya in the kitchen would not be the most effective choice. Instead, she changed Anya into a maid uniform and assigned her to help attract customers. At the academy, Blake told Raymond that Aiko had taken the day off because she was feeling upset. He also mentioned that there were still many barriers to break between dragons and humans. Raymond then asked whether Blake was ready for the upcoming training camp, since the Gemini month was approaching. Blake wondered if the participants would be announced soon. Raymond explained that most of the camp attendees usually came from the heirs of Lautremont's Holy Knight families. In other words, it was typically reserved for elites, which made it unlikely for ordinary students like Blake and Raymond to be chosen. Later that day, a teacher announced the names of the selected participants. One chosen student was absent at the time, and that student was Luca. Immediately, the classroom buzzed with whispers. Blake was confused by the sudden reaction. Raymond explained that Luca had not attended the academy for 3 months. Blake asked who Luca actually was. Raymond was shocked that Blake did not recognize her, considering she was the student council secretary. Blake admitted that he had never once met her. Luca was known as a remarkably talented young dragon knight who had even surpassed Rebecca in skill. Blake could hardly believe it. After finishing the list of selected participants, the teacher confirmed Raymond's earlier assumption that only elite students have been chosen. Just when it seemed final, the teacher added that the academy would also be introducing a new system that year, allowing a special invitation for a student who had not been selected through the usual criteria. Rebecca was asked to make the official announcement. She declared that she had personally chosen one student to attend the training camp, and that student was Blake. The classroom erupted in cheers, while Blake stood there in complete shock. Unbeknownst to them, a girl was quietly observing the students from a nearby window. Later, inside the student council room, Blake asked Rebecca why he had been invited. She explained that he possessed a very special pal in Aiko. On top of that, he had defeated Necromancia and successfully calmed the actions of the judge, Avdaka. In her view, there was no doubt that Blake was exceptionally talented. Blake's face turned red as he listened. Rebecca admitted that under the old selection criteria, there had been no opportunity for him to participate. That was why she created a new system, specifically to give him a fair chance to join the training camp. Blake was stunned that she had gone that far for him. Rebecca then gazed at Blake in a way that caught him off guard. Outside the room, Sylvia and Jessica were secretly listening in. They grew increasingly anxious, worried that Rebecca might grow even closer to Blake. Suddenly, Maximilian opened the door, causing Sylvia and Jessica to lose their balance and stumble inside. Rebecca immediately scolded them for eavesdropping on her conversation with Blake. Maximilian then delivered some troubling news to Rebecca. The students gathered outside after noticing thick smoke coming from the Ekblad dorm room. Rebecca and the others rushed over, and the moment they opened the door, they found a coffin in the center of the room with a girl lying inside. The girl was Luca. The entire room was filled with smoke, making the situation look far more alarming than it actually was. Blake wondered if the girl was dead. Jessica panicked and anxiously asked what they were supposed to do. Suddenly, Luca opened her eyes and looked at them. It turned out the smoke was just incense she had burned. Luca quickly apologized for causing such a commotion. Rebecca reassured her that it was fine because what mattered most was that she was safe. She gently suggested that Luca be more careful when burning large amounts of incense. Luca promised she would be more cautious next time. Jessica, still confused, asked why there was a coffin in the room. Luca explained that it was not a coffin, but a traditional bed used by the Ekblad race, and that it would be used throughout a person's lifetime. Jessica, frustrated, said it sounded no different from a coffin. Luca looked visibly shaken by Jessica's sharp reaction. Rebecca stepped in and asked Jessica not to be too harsh, since Luca was sensitive by nature. Rebecca then introduced Luca to Blake and the others. Luca was a forest fairy from the Ekblad race, a clan known for its exceptional skill in medicine making, with a reputation recognized worldwide. The Ekblad were also part of the Knight clans and had produced many dragon knights. Luca's talent was widely known, and she had even broken Rebecca's record. She was officially recorded as the youngest dragon knight in history. Rebecca asked about Gawain, her pal. Luca admitted that Gawain had not recovered yet. She still did not fully understand the root of the problem, but Gawain had been refusing to let her ride him. It had been almost 3 months since Luca last rode Gawain. Sylvia believed it would be difficult to help if they did not even know the core issue. Rebecca, however, saw things differently. She believed the problem lay within the astral flow that connected Luca and Gawain. If the connection remained unstable, Gawain's life could be at risk. At the same time, Aiko was enjoying her freshly clean bed. She suddenly remembered a nightmare she had the night before. Fear crept in, and without realizing it, she gripped the bedsheet tightly. Elsewhere, Blake could not stop thinking about Gawain and Luca. Through the astral flow, dragons received life energy from their human partners. and if that connection was severed for 3 months, it could become extremely dangerous for Gawain. Meanwhile, Anya was taking a shower. For the past 2 weeks, she had been secretly working at the school cafeteria, investigating every corner of the place in hopes of uncovering something important. When Blake crossed her mind, her face turned red in embarrassment, and she accidentally dropped her soap. She slipped, startled, and wondered why she had suddenly been thinking about him. After her shower, Anya changed into her maid uniform and prepared for work. When the cafeteria owner mentioned being asked to assist with the upcoming training camp, but being unable to close the cafeteria during that time, Anya offered to help. Not long after, Blake went to his room carrying a crepe for Aiko. The moment Aiko opened the door, she rushed toward him. Annoyed that he had taken so long, she quickly devoured the crepe. Blake was surprised to see tears forming in her eyes and asked if she was okay. Aiko shared her nightmare. The figure in her dream resembled Necromantia, but it was not the same being. The creature had 9 eyes and a massive, strange shape that gave off a dark and unsettling presence. Aiko felt as if she had encountered it before, long ago. That night, Blake noticed that Aiko was unable to sleep. He lay down beside her, which made Aiko question why he was suddenly next to her. Blake explained that when he was little, he would sleep beside someone whenever he had trouble sleeping. He also teased that doing so might prevent Aiko from having accidents at night. Feeling embarrassed and offended, Aiko kicked him hard. Blake quietly thought that she seemed to be feeling better. During class the next day, Aiko fell asleep at her desk. Raymond commented that she seemed to have recovered. He then asked Blake whether he had finished what they had discussed previously. Blake admitted that he still had a long way to go. Raymond jokingly asked whether it had something to do with responsibilities at night, but Blake firmly denied that. Later, Blake noticed Luca walking alone in the schoolyard. She went to Gawain's stable and began to cry as she remembered the last time she rode him. Gawain woke up and growled in frustration. Overwhelmed, Luca ran away in tears. Blake watched the entire scene from behind a wall. Determined to help, Blake went to the student council room and asked Rebecca if there was any way to reconcile Luca and Gawain. Rebecca was surprised by his sudden concern. Blake explained that he had once been separated from his own pal for a long time before finally reuniting with Aiko, so he understood how Luca must be feeling and wanted to help her. Rebecca admitted there was one possible method, but it was risky. She suggested that Blake try riding Gawain. When Blake had ridden Necromantia before, it had felt as though he understood what the dragon was feeling. Perhaps the same approach could help them understand Gawain's heart. Without hesitation, Blake agreed to try. Blake headed to Luca's room with Aiko and Sylvia. He wanted to find out whether Luca could communicate with Gawain. As soon as they stepped inside, they saw Luca fast asleep inside her coffin, as usual. Blake's face flushed slightly when he noticed how peaceful she looked. Sylvia quickly urged him to wake Luca up instead of just standing there. When Luca finally opened her eyes, her attention immediately shifted to Aiko's horn. She seemed fascinated and suddenly wrapped her arms around Aiko, asking if she could have it. Aiko firmly refused, explaining that it was impossible. Luca then examined the horn in an overly curious way, which made Aiko protest and ask her to stop. Aiko could not understand how Luca dared to behave so boldly toward a high-ranking dragon like her. Blake stepped in and explained that Rebecca was waiting for Luca at stable number 7. Luca asked what they were planning to do with Gawain. Blake reassured her, saying that everything they were doing was for her and Gawain's sake, so she did not need to worry. Luca said she would get ready first. However, to Blake's surprise, she casually began changing her clothes right in front of him. Blake was caught off guard and quickly turned away, his face turning red with embarrassment. He could not believe she felt that comfortable doing that while he was still in the room. When they arrived at the stable, Rebecca was already there with Angela and Maximilian. Rebecca explained that Blake would ride Gawain to figure out why the dragon had been rejecting Luca. Blake asked again whether Luca could try communicating with Gawain first, since that might be the best approach. Luca nodded and agreed to follow their suggestion. As soon as Luca stepped closer, Gawain let out a low, uneasy sound. The reaction made her hesitate, and she almost turned to leave, but Rebecca gently stopped her. Luca admitted that she did not think she could do it. After she stepped back, Rebecca told Blake it was time to begin. Aiko prepared Blake's arc for him. Once everything was ready, Blake put on his armor. Rebecca could not hide how impressed she was seeing him suited up like that. Even so, she reminded him to stay calm and not act recklessly. Blake thanked Aiko for her help, and in return, she accepted a crepe as a simple token of appreciation. Blake slowly approached Gawain. The dragon let out another deep rumble. Blake tried to understand why Gawain had been refusing Luca. Suddenly, a massive explosion shattered the stable, catching everyone completely off guard. In the chaos, Gawain soared into the air and formed a glowing magic circle above himself. From the way it looked, he was preparing to launch an attack at Blake. Blake froze in shock at the sight, while his friends watched in growing concern for his safety. Gawain activated his magic circle and launched another attack at Blake. A powerful blast erupted from inside the enclosure and struck him head-on. His arc shattered, and a wave of pain rushed through his body. Aiko immediately ran to his side, calling his name over and over, trying to keep him conscious and focused. After that incident, Blake and the others returned to the academy building. He apologized, feeling frustrated that he had failed. Rebecca did not blame him at all, as long as he was safe. From their point of view, trying to reason with Gawain seemed pointless. If only they understood why Gawain had rejected Luca. Rebecca mentioned that the upcoming training camp might actually help repair the relationship between Luca and Gawain. Blake then asked Rebecca for permission to enter the girls' dormitory building because he wanted to speak with Luca. Aiko was confused about what he was thinking, but Rebecca agreed under one condition. Aiko had to go with him. A boy entering the girls' dorm alone would easily spark rumors. Blake thanked Rebecca, while Aiko felt annoyed since she had not even agreed to it herself. At that time, Luca was relaxing by herself, soaking quietly and reflecting on the first time Gawain had been a tiny baby dragon. She missed the days when she could hold him close. Not long after, Blake knocked on her door. Luca welcomed Blake and Aiko inside and served them tea. Blake apologized for failing to get Gawain to explain himself. He asked whether Luca still planned to join the training camp. Rumor had it that the camp would be held near the Nogata Forest, a sacred place known for being a resting ground for ancient dragons that had lived for thousands of years. Blake believed that if Luca went there, Gawain might calm down. A change of scenery could make a difference. He also encouraged her to meet Gawain one more time. In his view, a pal and a breeder were inseparable, almost like destiny itself. Aiko grew irritated listening to Blake talk so much. She snapped at him, calling him clueless and hopeless, and the two of them started arguing right in front of Luca. Watching them, Luca found herself longing for the days when she could ride Gawain freely through the skies. After thinking it through, she finally decided to join the training camp. That night, Milhouse visited Anya's residence. He asked whether she had infiltrated Onsulivon Dragonar Academy. Anya admitted that she had done so to keep a closer watch on Blake and Aiko. She also mentioned that she would be working as part of the food service staff during the training camp. Milhouse explained that at the edge of Lake Elan stood the Grand Tomb of Willingham, where the remains of young dragons were buried. Even though those dragons had died young, he believed they still held value for his mysterious research. He told Anya to meet him there and instructed her not to stray too far from the students. He had already anticipated that the descendant of Avalon would eventually appear before him. In his opinion, Aiko's name did not suit her, and he even criticized her master's choice of name. Still, he believed that no matter what name a master gave to a pal, losing that bond would always be painful. The next day, the training camp participants set off together toward Lake Alans, each riding their own dragon. Since Gawain had already departed earlier, Luca rode on a magic circle alongside Rebecca. Rebecca was confident that Gawain would head straight to the campsite because he was an intelligent dragon. Blake rode behind Maximilian on his dragon, Arianrod. Maximilian firmly reminded him not to even think about riding Arianrod himself. Blake assured him that he had no intention of touching his dragon at all. Meanwhile, Aiko rode with Sylvia. She enthusiastically asked for Lancelot to become the first dragon to arrive at Lake Alans. Sylvia calmly reminded her not to give orders so casually. Aiko commented that Lancelot was such a good dragon because he only followed Sylvia's commands. Sylvia felt increasingly confused about why she constantly had to deal with Aiko, especially when Blake already caused her enough stress. In a sudden and inappropriate moment, Aiko crossed a personal boundary with Sylvia, acting impulsively out of jealousy because she believed Blake paid more attention to Sylvia and Rebecca than to her. Sylvia was caught completely off guard and felt uncomfortable, firmly asking Aiko to stop. Aiko, still frustrated, insisted that something about Sylvia was unfair, but the tension eventually settled as they continued their journey. Once they arrived at the campsite, Rebecca addressed all the participants. She explained that the experiences they would gain over the next few days could shape their future in a meaningful way. The Holy Dragon Knights who had completed this camp in the past had grown into outstanding individuals. If they wanted to follow that path, they needed to show determination and aim for the top. The official training would begin the following day. That first day was free time, and Rebecca even encouraged everyone to enjoy the water. The students cheered excitedly. Some swam in the lake, others played volleyball, sunbathed, or simply splashed around with friends. Angela quietly headed toward the forest. A few students asked where she was going, but she kept her reasons to herself. Blake stayed by the edge of the lake, watching his friends. Suddenly, Jessica approached him playfully and invited him to join her for what she jokingly described as a honeymoon-like escape. She pulled him toward the middle of the lake. At the same time, Sylvia felt uneasy about the swimsuit Cosette had prepared for her. Cosette had intentionally chosen a bold design so Sylvia would stand out and draw attention. Sylvia wanted to refuse, but Cosette insisted that she wear it anyway, believing it would boost her confidence in front of everyone. At that moment, the male students could not help staring at Rebecca, who showed up in a bold and eye-catching swimsuit. Her confident presence instantly lifted the mood, and suddenly all the guys felt like joining the training camp had been totally worth it. Rebecca then leaped into the lake and started swimming with ease. Not long after that, Sylvia walked to the edge of the lake wearing the swimsuit Cosette had prepared for her. She admitted that she felt a little uncomfortable with how revealing it was, but Cosette reassured her that the look would definitely make Blake happy. Before long, they heard Blake yelling in panic while he was with Jessica. Out of nowhere, Lancelot appeared with Aiko riding on his back. Aiko had borrowed Lancelot to stop Jessica's reckless behavior, and she invited Sylvia to come along. Together, they rushed off to chase Jessica and help Blake. Meanwhile, everyone else was enjoying themselves at the lake, except for Luca, who chose to lie down alone at the lodge. That night, Blake felt sore all over because of everything that had happened earlier. As he stepped outside, he noticed Luca walking alone in the distance. Curious, he decided to follow her. From afar, Anya had been quietly keeping an eye on Blake the whole time. Blake continued searching and eventually saw Luca approaching Gawain. She pleaded with Gawain to speak to her again. Luca confessed that she felt truly happy being Gawain's maestro, and she wanted them to stay together just like they used to. She slowly stepped closer and tried to reach out to him, but Gawain responded with a loud, intimidating roar. Luca broke down in tears, asking why he would not say anything to her. Suddenly, Blake appeared behind her. Luca was surprised to see him there. Blake admitted he was frustrated that Gawain kept shutting Luca out even though she was trying so hard to reconnect. Overcome with emotion, Blake stepped forward, determined to make Gawain respond. Gawain reacted immediately and launched a fierce attack at Blake. Blake dodged just in time, realizing that without his arc, he would not stand a chance against such overwhelming power. After avoiding another strike, Blake took off running, intentionally provoking Gawain to chase him. From a distance, Anya silently observed the entire scene. Gawain kept swiping at Blake, but Blake skillfully avoided each attack. Luca desperately wanted to stop the fight. Blake carefully maneuvered Gawain closer to a better position. At the right moment, he jumped and managed to land on Gawain's back. He tried to take control, but a magical circle above Gawain suddenly activated and sent Blake flying. Blake wondered whether it was a defensive spell, a reflection barrier, or perhaps Gawain instinctively viewed Blake's attempt as a threat. Blake's body went limp, and he soon lost consciousness. Luca rushed to his side, crying when she saw him lying there. Anya watched in silence, thinking that if she did nothing, Blake might not survive. Part of her felt that this could be seen as punishment for anyone who interfered with Milhouse. However, she suddenly remembered how Blake once saved her when she nearly fell off a cliff. As Luca reached out toward Blake, Anya stopped her and warned that if he was left untreated, his life would be in danger. She told Luca to go find help while she took care of Blake herself. Before Luca could ask who Anya really was, Anya urged her to hurry. Anya decided to help Blake because she did not want to owe him anything. Blake later woke up in a strange place. Navi appeared beside him and whispered softly. Blake was shocked but quickly recognized her. Navi explained that he was inside the vessel of the late Holy Dragon, a sacred space that could only be entered by spirits. She said she had called him there to share Gawain's true feelings. Gawain then appeared in a much smaller and cuter form. Navi explained that although Gawain was a powerful dragon, his emotional maturity was not fully developed, which was why he looked like that in this realm. She told Blake that Gawain wanted to apologize and clarify that his back was meant to be ridden only by his true master Luca. Navi then revealed what had happened 3 months earlier. Luca had fallen during a training session while riding Gawain. She explained the dragon dance, a secret art of the Ekblad race passed down through generations. Mastering it required natural talent and relentless dedication. The accident happened during practice, and ever since then, Luca had developed a deep fear of riding dragons. In her fragile state, it was too dangerous for her to ride again. That was why Gawain kept refusing Luca, even if it meant breaking their bond and severing their connection to the astral flow. Blake finally understood that Gawain had been risking his own existence for Luca's safety. Navi then revealed that Gawain only had 5 days left to live. Suddenly, Blake felt something strange around him. Navi gently said that it was time for him to return. She encouraged him, saying she believed he could restore the bond between Gawain and Luca. She also mentioned how much she looked forward to watching Blake's journey unfold, calling him the Knight of Avalon. Before Blake faded away, Navi gave him a gentle kiss. She truly hoped that one day he would be ready to ride with her as well. Blake woke up in a bedroom, confused about how he even got there. He had no memory of anyone carrying him inside. Near the bed, he noticed fragments of Fafnir Dragonstone, left over from the healing magic that had been used on him. He was completely caught off guard when he realized that Luca was under the same blanket, very close to him. Startled, he let out a loud yell. The noise woke Luca up. Blake quickly asked what she had been doing. Luca calmly explained that his body temperature had suddenly dropped, so she had stayed close to help warm him up. Once he understood, Blake sincerely thanked her for taking care of him. He then shared that he had spoken with Gawain. Blake told her about what Na'vi had revealed regarding Gawain's situation. Hearing that, Luca began to cry. She had never imagined that Gawain would go that far just to protect her. Blake reassured her that Gawain had always been thinking about her all this time. Luca blamed herself for everything that had happened. Blake gently asked her to stay strong, reminding her that Gawain only had 5 days left to live. Luca quietly pointed out that it was already the 6th day of the training camp. Blake responded that for now, their top priority was Gawain. In a moment like this, he believed Gawain was definitely thinking about Luca as well. That night, Angela went to a secluded location. She suspected it was a hidden storage room connected to dragon preservation, likely containing historical and cultural records about dragons. While searching through the room, she found an ancient contract book that she had thought was destroyed years ago. Angela opened the book and began reading. It described how 2 important bloodlines had separated from Imbolc, the Dragon King of Wisdom. One became the Holy Empire of Avalon, and the other became the Dark Kingdom of Nalenia. The 2 factions had been locked in endless conflict. Suddenly, Milhaos appeared and explained that those events had taken place during the era of Zonotone. Angela was shocked and immediately questioned whether he was an envoy of the Empire. Milhaos told her to surrender, claiming that her strength had never matched his, and that it had always been that way. He addressed Angela by the name Anne. Hearing that, she froze. Only Julius had ever called her Anne. Out of nowhere, Anya struck Angela, causing her to lose consciousness. Anya then asked what she should do next. Milhaos initially ordered her to kill Angela, but suddenly he clutched his head in pain. After a brief moment, he changed his mind and told Anya to leave Angela as she was. Meanwhile, Blake was alone in his room when Aiko suddenly rushed in and wrapped her arms tightly around him. She scolded him, saying she had thought he was dead. Aiko warned him not to go somewhere she could not reach again. She continued holding him tightly, unwilling to let go. Sylvia mentioned that Aiko had been worried about Blake for 5 straight days. Blake apologized to Aiko for making her worry. Rebecca also expressed her relief that he had finally returned safely. Suddenly, Luca burst into the room, breathing heavily, her face filled with panic as she urgently brought news about Gawain. That night, a bonfire party was held to celebrate making it through 5 intense days of training. Rebecca felt incredibly proud of everyone at the camp. They had proven how strong and determined they were. As a way to appreciate the smooth execution of the program and the progress each participant had shown, she decided to host a small closing celebration. She invited everyone to raise a toast together and enjoy the moment. Around that same time, Blake and the others ran toward the forest. Blake looked like he was in pain, but he insisted he was fine. Thanks to healing magic, his wounds were no longer critical. Even so, he intentionally hid the truth about his condition from his friends. Earlier, Luca had informed them that Gawain had disappeared. She had no idea where he had gone because their astral flow connection had been severed. Rebecca then brought up the Grand Tomb of Willingham. She shared the story of the great dragon Willingham, about a young master dragon named Nuada and the girl who had once been his master. Nuada chose to sever their astral flow and disappear because he pitied the illness his master was suffering from. He could not bear watching her struggle while he remained by her side, overwhelmed by sorrow. One day, the girl finally recovered, but in his solitude, Nuada had already taken his last breath at the Grand Tomb of Willingham. Blake wondered if it was possible that Gawain had thought about following Nuada's path. Rebecca admitted that the idea had crossed her mind as well. Luca explained that the Grand Tomb of Willingham was the final resting place of young dragons, and Gawain was one of them. Rebecca decided to cancel the closing party and organize a search effort. She planned for all the camp participants to search the area around the Grand Tomb. However, Blake disagreed. He believed everyone was exhausted after the intense training and deserved to enjoy the celebration. Rebecca then suggested that only the student council members conduct the search. Blake pointed out that if every student council member suddenly left, people would grow suspicious. He insisted that the party should continue as planned, and he would find Gawain himself. In the end, Blake departed with Sylvia, Luca, and Aiko, riding on Lancelet. He was confident they could locate Gawain quickly. Meanwhile, Milhaos discovered that Blake and the others had gone to search for Gawain. Without hesitation, he used his magic to summon creatures. Blake and his group soon arrived at their destination. Blake asked if Angela was there. Sylvia was not completely sure, but based on the report she had heard, Angela was believed to be in that area. Not long after, a deep rumble echoed through the air. Dark clouds gathered and churned above them. Aiko felt the same uneasy premonition she had experienced before. The doors of a nearby building opened, and numerous necromancia emerged. Back at the camp, the students who were celebrating were confused when lightning struck in the distance. Soon after, dragons began emerging from the forest and the lake, heading toward the camp. At the same time, Sylvia was ensnared by necromancia's tendrils, which tore at her clothes. Fortunately, Lancelot quickly defeated the creature using a magic circle. They noticed that the necromancia were moving toward the training camp. Sylvia urged them to leave that matter to Rebecca and the others, as they needed to reach the Grand Tomb of Willingham immediately. Meanwhile, Rebecca led the students in defending the camp from the approaching necromancia. She called on everyone to demonstrate the skills they had gained during the training. At her signal, they launched their magic attacks together toward the advancing creatures. As Sylvia and the others flew toward the Grand Tomb, Blake asked Aiko to lend him Arc. He explained that if things continued this way, he would not be able to support the others properly. Aiko scolded him, saying that with his body still covered in injuries, even a replica Arc would put too much strain on him. She found it difficult to agree. Blake then asked Aiko to create a lighter Arc specifically for him. Aiko was surprised by the request, but Blake reassured her that she could make the right choice for the situation. When he gently patted her head, her face flushed. She wondered why he seemed so confident. Blake explained that he trusted her because she was his pal. Hearing that, Aiko decided to help. She told him that once inside the vessel of the Holy Dragon, her soul and body would be separated by a great distance. Blake promised that he would protect her physical body. He then embraced Aiko tightly, which made her feel flustered. With her face turning red, she asked him not to let go. When they finally arrived at the Grand Tomb of Willingham, they encountered Mildhaus. They were shocked to see him there. Sylvia was furious and determined to hold him accountable for his actions. Mildhaus only laughed at her reaction and mocked her for forming a contract during the orphan ritual. Sylvia was stunned by his words, and memories of her childhood resurfaced. She remembered wondering why Julius had only wanted to talk with Glenn. She also recalled Julius's execution after he was accused of killing a dragon. Mildhaus revealed that he was aware of the turmoil within Lancelot. He also mentioned the Princess of Avalon. Blake was confused about how Mildhaus knew that name. Mildhaus explained that the necromancia were not ordinary young dragons, but maestros. He was certain they were familiar with the tragic tale of a dragon who sacrificed his life for the master he loved. According to him, that dragon was none other than Nuada, the Holy Dragon of Willingham. Meanwhile, Aiko was inside the vessel of the late Holy Dragon with Navi. Aiko explained that she needed a sample from Navi because she had to create an Arc as quickly as possible. She admitted that Navi reminded her a lot of herself. Navi agreed, but she set one condition. She asked Aiko to promise that when the time came, she would give Blake the finest original art possible. Aiko was stunned. She understood that offering an original Arc meant a pal would dedicate her very being to her master. Aiko hesitated and felt uneasy about that promise, yet she had no other choice. In the end, she agreed. Navi smiled gently and began preparing a replica Arc. Suddenly, she sensed that Blake was in critical condition. Aiko urged Navi to hurry. At the training camp, the students were trapped by the tentacle-like limbs of the necromancia. Their bodies were tightly restrained, leaving them completely helpless. The creature's grasp tore at their uniforms and restrained them in ways that left them frightened and unable to move. One of the students, Jessica, was caught in a particularly dangerous position and could only cry out in panic. Fortunately, her pal, Rhiannon, immediately bit through the creature's limb and freed her from its hold. Jessica felt deeply grateful to Rhiannon for saving her. Rebecca kept throwing her weapon toward the endless waves of necromancia, but the enemy forces seemed never-ending. She believed there had to be a way to stop them. Sylvia continued fighting alongside Lancelot, determined to defeat the necromancia in front of her. Before long, both she and Lancelot were restrained. Blake grew increasingly worried, but Sylvia insisted that he stay where he was and protect Aiko. She was confident that she could overcome the spirit of Nuada on her own. Not long after, Luca was also ensnared. Then, the creature's limbs suddenly seized Aiko. Blake rushed to pull her back, but he was knocked away. The limbs wrapped around his body and bound him tightly. He kept calling out to Aiko, and at last she opened her eyes. She looked around in shock, confused about why she was restrained. Blake felt immense relief seeing that she had regained consciousness. Aiko told him that he was completely hopeless whenever she was not by his side. Soon after, the light of the Arc appeared and struck down the necromancia. Watching from above, Mildhaus commented on how remarkable the Child of Avalon truly was. Blake emerged in his armor and immediately launched an attack on Mildhaus. Mildhaus blocked Blake's strike with one hand and swung his weapon in response, but Blake narrowly avoided the blow. Milhouse questioned whether Blake intended to simply leave Nuada alone. Blake stated that Sylvia would be the one to defeat Nuada. At that moment, Sylvia was still fighting to eliminate the remaining Necromantia. Milhouse mocked Blake, claiming that he was nothing more than a copy. Before continuing the fight, Aiko informed Blake that the arc he was using was more defense-oriented. She advised him not to rely on reckless physical attacks and instead to focus on using magic. Blake began chanting a spell and summoned Aegis. The magical construct launched an attack capable of turning its target to stone. Milhouse quickly recognized it as petrification magic and pointed out that such magic was considered forbidden among knights. Without hesitation, he destroyed Aegis and struck Blake with tremendous force, sending him flying across the battlefield. Milhouse challenged Blake to continue the fight. However, the arc's power began to fade, leaving only the portion attached to Blake's arm. As Milhouse prepared to attack again, Blake swiftly leaped aside and cast his spell directly at Milhouse's left arm. Instantly, the arm turned to stone. Seizing the opportunity, Blake delivered a powerful blow that sent Milhouse crashing backward. Enraged, Milhouse prepared to retaliate. Suddenly, Sylvia intervened and asked them to stop fighting. She explained that she had already returned Nuada's spirit to its proper place and suggested that Milhouse surrender. To everyone's shock, Milhouse shattered his petrified arm without hesitation. He revealed that the arm had been artificial all along. He admitted that he needed to reconsider his view of Sylvia, as he had once believed she was a coward, but now recognized her true strength. With that, Milhouse retreated before anyone could pursue him. In the distance, they noticed flashes of light from another battle near the training grounds. At that moment, Sylvia approached Lancelot, who was beginning to lose his strength. Luca said that everyone had worked incredibly hard, and that she was the only one who had not truly fought yet. She gently took hold of Blake's arm and lowered herself, overwhelmed by her feelings. Aiko was startled when she saw Luca like that. Luca told Blake that he had even risked his life for her and for Gawain. Because of that, she felt that if she stayed by his side, she could give everything she had without hesitation. She wanted to help everyone, and more than that, she promised she would save them all. Blake encouraged her and assured her that he would always stand behind her. Luca sincerely apologized to Gawain and promised that she would no longer avoid him. She hoped that he would accept her again. She pleaded for Gawain to enter her astral flow once more and unite with her, because Gawain was her partner. In an instant, a dazzling light burst forth from Gawain's body. Meanwhile, Rebecca and the others were starting to grow exhausted while facing the Necromantia forces. Maximilian urged everyone to follow orders and stay focused. Unfortunately, Rebecca's arc vanished, and the enemy forces were simply too numerous. For a moment, Rebecca wondered if that was as far as her chance to defeat them would go. Suddenly, they saw something glowing in the distance, flying toward them. Maximilian questioned whether it was part of the enemy forces, but Rebecca felt that it seemed different. It turned out to be Luca, arriving with Blake while riding on Gawain. Luca told Blake to hold on tightly. She then stood up and focused her mind. Blake could feel that Gawain was flying at incredible speed. Blake's words of encouragement echoed in Luca's mind. She performed the dragon dance and unleashed a shower of purifying Amrita upon the Necromantia forces. In a matter of moments, the enemy ranks collapsed under her attack. The students cheered with excitement as the Necromantia forces disappeared almost instantly, calling out Luca's name with joy. Rebecca felt a wave of relief, knowing that Luca had finally brought everything to an end. Luca and Blake then flew on Gawain toward the training camp to reunite with their friends. Since ancient times, many Dragon Knights of Eckbald had been nicknamed the Elfin Dancers, and in that moment, Luca proved that the title truly suited her. That night, Milhouse reported the events he had experienced to a noble from the Zephyros Empire named Klaus. Milhouse explained that he had come to understand the limits of the La Tremont Empire's power. Thanks to the incident, they had also managed to reverse the Necromantia summoning technique. Klaus described it as a victory that had merely been delayed. The next day, Sylvia and the others raised a toast to celebrate Blake's return from the hospital. Blake thanked everyone warmly. Rebecca felt relieved that all members of the student council had survived. Angela had also been found safe and unharmed inside the Grand Tomb of Willingham, and overall, the situation had ended on a positive note. Suddenly, a loud rumbling sound came from outside. It turned out that a courier named Olietta had arrived to deliver an official letter to Sylvia from Lord Paladin, her father. Sylvia opened the letter and read it aloud. Its contents stated that her father was requesting her presence at the upcoming Intercontinental Congress, Ellison. In addition, she was asked to bring Blake and Aiko with her. Hearing that, both Blake and Aiko were visibly surprised. On that day, Sylvia set out with Blake and Aiko to attend the Intercontinental Congress. They traveled on Lancelot's back. The Congress is held once every 5 years and attended by the 5 great leaders. It is a major summit where the future of the Arcstrata continent is discussed. This time, the Knight Nation of Lochtremont had been chosen as the host. Blake found it surprising that he and Aiko were involved in such an important event. The city they were heading to was called Fontaine, and Aiko could not hide her curiosity about what it would be like. Blake explained that Fontaine was the capital of Lochtremont. Aiko became even more excited, already imagining how many crepes she would get to try there. Before long, the city of Fontaine came into view from above. As soon as they arrived, a group of maids welcomed Sylvia. Frida greeted her and informed her that the paladin had been waiting. Sylvia wanted to take Blake and Aiko on a quick tour, but Frida gently stopped her and asked her to meet the paladin first. Sylvia apologized to Blake and Aiko before heading off. While Sylvia met with the paladin, Blake and Aiko followed Frida through the palace corridors. They took in the grand surroundings, noticing how tight the security was. Frida explained that as the host nation, Lochtremont had taken every possible precaution to ensure the safety of the visiting dignitaries and to provide them with proper hospitality. She also mentioned that the palace staff were extremely busy and might not be able to personally attend to guests like Blake and Aiko. Hearing that, Aiko felt confused and slightly irritated, though Blake calmly prevented the situation from escalating. Frida then brought them to Primrose. She was surprised to see Primrose dressed in a rather casual and less formal state. Primrose explained that she had changed out of her uniform because it had gotten dirty while she was mopping. Frida reminded her to stay presentable, and Primrose quickly apologized. Aiko instinctively stepped in front of Blake, trying to block his view out of embarrassment. Primrose then helped Aiko put on a maid uniform for fun. When Blake noticed several maid uniforms hanging out to dry, he asked why there were so many. Primrose explained that she always brought multiple sets because her uniform tended to get dirty easily. Aiko commented that the uniform looked a bit tight and wondered how comfortable it really was to wear something like that all day. Frida entrusted Blake and Aiko to Primrose and asked her to finish her cleaning duties first before showing them around. As Frida walked away and Primrose picked up her mop, there was a brief, awkward moment when Frida's outfit shifted unexpectedly. Primrose quickly tried to lighten the mood with a casual remark, attempting to prevent any embarrassment. Blake's face immediately turned red, and Aiko covered his eyes again, clearly flustered. Frida looked annoyed at Primrose for the unnecessary comment. Meanwhile, Sylvia entered her father's chamber. Her father, Oswald, rushed toward his beloved daughter, clearly overjoyed to see her after so long. Sylvia responded with a firm gesture that made him stop in his tracks. Oswald commented that both her determination and her words reminded him very much of her mother, Elizabeth. Sylvia remarked that as a king, he should feel embarrassed being scolded by his own daughter. Oswald then invited Sylvia to sit and talk. She asked why he had involved her in the Intercontinental Congress when she was still technically a student, still in training. Oswald explained that Sylvia was the 4th princess and also a dragon knight. She met all the necessary qualifications, and surprisingly, it was not Oliata who had recommended her participation, but Veronica. Sylvia was shocked to hear that. Even though Veronica had always been strict with her, she had acknowledged Sylvia's abilities. Sylvia also asked why Blake and Aiko had to come at such a busy time for the country. Oswald admitted that although the nation was overwhelmed with preparations, his own role was mostly ceremonial. The busier the people around him became, the more free time he actually had. Sylvia realized that her father simply wanted company and thought that he was being a little childish. Elsewhere, Blake helped Primrose finish cleaning while taking in the beautiful scenery surrounding the palace. He later invited Aiko to explore the area. Soon after, Primrose offered to act as their guide. Aiko happily changed out of the maid uniform and put her usual clothes back on. At the same time, Sylvia asked her father about Julius. She wanted to know whether it was true that he had already been punished. Oswald asked why she was bringing it up. Julius was known as a dragon slayer, someone who had turned against his own pal. Even if there had been reasons behind his actions, it was considered a serious taboo. As Sylvia left the room, she felt certain that her father had not told her the whole truth. That evening, Aiko was thrilled as she admired the breathtaking city lights. She could not contain her excitement and kept expressing her amazement along the way. She realized that the atmosphere there felt very different from Ansu Levine. Primrose explained that 500 years earlier, King Lionel I of Chevron had appointed Durham as the first paladin. The statue standing before them served as a symbol of that historic moment. Blake added that Durham later separated from the Kingdom of Chevron and went on to establish the Knight Nation of Lochtremont. Aiko invited Blake to grab some snacks and shop for stylish clothes. She really loved the place and even started dancing around near the fountain. Unexpectedly, Anya was still secretly watching them from a distance. After spending the day walking around with Blake and Aiko, Primrose began to feel tired and lay down on a park bench to rest. Blake apologized for dragging her all over town and making her exhausted. Primrose, however, felt sorry that she could not keep up with them instead. When Aiko spotted a crepe stand, she eagerly asked Blake to buy one for her right away. Around them, they noticed couples strolling closely together. Aiko became curious when she saw that Blake's expression looked a little envious. His face turned red as he awkwardly denied what she was implying. Aiko asked why those pairs were standing so close to each other. Blake explained that the people in front of them were romantic couples. After understanding that, Aiko boldly told Blake to hold her hand. Blake gently took Aiko's hand, and both of their faces flushed with embarrassment. They were surprised when they noticed a couple nearby sharing a kiss. Aiko quickly reminded Blake that she had only allowed him to hold her hand, nothing more than that. Suddenly, a massive airship hovered above the city. It carried the crest of the Withersausen family, representatives at the Congress from the Zephyros Empire, and delegates of the Emperor. Blake and Aiko were startled when Cosette suddenly appeared behind them. It turned out she had come on purpose to escort them. That evening, Aiko and Blake wore outfits prepared by Primrose. Blake felt that his clothes were uncomfortably tight, while Aiko looked thrilled and could not wait for dinner to begin. Not long after, Sylvia approached them. She was wearing a stunning gown and looked absolutely beautiful, which left Blake momentarily speechless. Noticing Blake standing there with a flushed face, he complimented Sylvia on how lovely she looked. Sylvia's cheeks turned pink at his praise. However, Aiko became upset because Blake had not complimented her appearance, even though she was also wearing a beautiful dress. Blake, clearly flustered, quickly said that Aiko looked wonderful too, but his response did not fully cheer her up. Frida soon arrived to inform them that the preparations were complete. Aiko casually teased Frida with an embarrassing nickname, which made Frida blush deeply before guiding them to meet Oswald. Oswald greeted Blake and commented that he looked refreshed. He also greeted Aiko and admitted he had not expected her horns to be real. Oswald thanked them for accepting his invitation and encouraged them to feel at home. Blake admitted that he felt nervous about meeting a paladin and was shocked to hear Aiko speaking so casually to one. Oswald simply laughed and expressed his gratitude for their involvement in the necromancia incident and the handling of the Grand Tomb of Willingham. Then, to everyone's surprise, Oswald announced that starting that day, he would appoint Blake as a Dragon Knight. Blake cried out in disbelief, completely overwhelmed by the news. He questioned whether that title should instead belong to a master owner like Princess Sylvia. Oswald explained that Aiko was a very special dragon who had taken on a human form, so it would be strange to treat her the same as ordinary dragons. He also praised Aiko's performance and asked why Blake doubted that Aiko was worthy of being considered a maestro. As a paladin, Oswald formally knighted Blake as a Dragon Knight. The knighting ceremony proceeded smoothly and solemnly. Sylvia felt incredibly happy seeing Blake officially become a Dragon Knight. If he were to advance further and become an Archdragonar, his status would rise to that of nobility, meaning he could even marry a princess. The thought alone made Sylvia blush nervously. Cosette noticed Sylvia's flushed face and asked if she was feeling unwell, but Sylvia insisted she was fine. During dinner, Sylvia mentioned to her father that the Emperor of Zephyros had not attended the Congress and had instead sent nobles as his representatives. Oswald explained that it was standard procedure. The Emperor had declined due to his age, since no one could escape the passage of time. Sylvia wondered why her father trusted that explanation so easily. Oswald reminded them that they must avoid triggering any conflict, which was why the upcoming masquerade ball played such an important role. Blake asked about the masquerade. Oswald explained that at the event, guests would cover their faces with masks and speak freely without worrying about which country they represented. He invited Blake, Aiko, and Sylvia to attend. Sylvia readily agreed. Aiko said she would come as long as there was a good meat menu at the party. Hearing that, Oswald encouraged the three of them to enjoy the masquerade the following night. Out of nowhere, Oswald questioned Blake, making sure that he was not involved in any inappropriate relationship with Sylvia. Sylvia felt confused about why her father would even bring something like that up. Oswald made it clear that he would not tolerate any behavior that crossed the line, even warning that Blake would face consequences if he so much as laid a finger on Sylvia. Blake responded sincerely, explaining that he had no romantic ties or secret relationship with Sylvia. Unfortunately, Sylvia stayed completely silent, offering no confirmation or denial of his words. That same night, Anya headed to a hidden base to meet Milhouse. She was stunned when she noticed that his left arm was detached. Calmly, Milhouse reattached it and tested its movement as if it were something routine. Seeing Anya's confused expression, Klaus guessed as she had no idea about the condition of Milhouse's arm. Klaus gave Anya the nickname Mahogany, describing it as a shade that symbolized maturity. He then asked whether she was the girl assisting Milhouse in his plans. After introducing himself, Anya quickly realized that Klaus was a noble affiliated with the Zephyros Empire's military. Klaus went on to explain that more than 10 years had passed since Milhous's downfall. During that time, Milhouse had lost his name, his pride, his reputation, and even his left arm. Klaus described him as a man who wandered across his homeland after violating a sacred taboo, which led to him being burdened by a curse. Anya was clearly shaken by that revelation. Milhouse calmly told Klaus that it would be better not to reopen stories from his past. Klaus then presented a magical device known as Yggdrasil. Milhouse asked whether the device was truly operational. They planned to test it the next day. The device was believed to have the power to force the young dragon, Eiko, to awaken. The entire plan had been Milhouse's idea. Eiko's body would be placed inside the device, and Anya's role was to abduct Eiko that very night. Meanwhile, Sylvia dreamed about necromancia. The next morning, she woke up and immediately stepped outside, puzzled by a sudden realization. She clearly remembered that the necromancia she had once fought was actually Mordrad, who had been pal Julius. Not long after, Sylvia crossed paths with Veronica, Avdaka, and Glenn. Avdaka appeared irritated by Sylvia's attitude and made a crude remark that crossed the line. Veronica quickly struck Avdaka to stop her from belittling Sylvia any further. Veronica reacted that way because she viewed Avdaka as immature and refused to let her disrespect Sylvia. Veronica then asked why Sylvia had come to see her so early in the morning. Sylvia explained that something had been bothering her. Veronica assumed it was about Mordred's ashes. After the Willingham incident, Veronica had secretly investigated every dragon grave. Just as she suspected, someone had moved the ashes from each grave, including Mordred's remains, which had been laid to rest there. On top of that, Veronica had uncovered clues pointing toward Mordred's involvement in recent events. Sylvia revealed that the man she had seen at the Grand Tomb of Willingham was Milhouse. She also had a strong feeling that Milhouse was actually Julius. Glenn was shocked upon hearing this and struggled to believe that Julius could have been an Imperial spy. Sylvia added that she had sensed Mordred's presence within the necromancia that attacked Ansu-Levon. Veronica warned Sylvia not to share this information with anyone. If rumors spread that Julius was still alive, their family's honor would be severely damaged. Sylvia agreed to keep the secret. Elsewhere, Klaus and Milhouse had already prepared Yggdrasil. With the power of a dragon nearly within their grasp, the Imperial throne no longer felt like an impossible dream for them. That day, Cosette got ready to bathe with Sylvia. She took off her clothes and headed straight to the pool. Sylvia wondered why Cosette still needed a bath even after trying on so many dresses. Cosette reminded her that every woman had to look absolutely stunning at a masquerade ball, and that was exactly why she had prepared her personal lotion. Sylvia curiously asked what Cosette planned to do with it. Cosette cheerfully explained that she wanted to give Sylvia a full body massage. Sylvia immediately looked uneasy and tried to step away. She asked Cosette to please move her hands because she felt uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Primrose was busy picking out dresses for Eiko. She showed Eiko several options, but Eiko felt that none of them had the kind of captivating aura she was looking for. She believed everyone would try to look their best at the party. Even though her real reason for attending was to enjoy the feast, as a dragon girl she refused to be outshined by ordinary humans. Primrose promised she would find the perfect dress for her. Eiko, feeling frustrated, warned Primrose not to disappoint her. Primrose could not quite figure out what kind of dress Eiko truly wanted. It seemed Eiko was being very selective. Eiko reminded her that she refused to lose to humans, especially to Sylvia. When Primrose gently asked whether Eiko disliked Sylvia, Eiko admitted she did not hate her. She just felt uneasy because Sylvia had been getting closer to Blake lately. Primrose smiled softly. She understood how complicated it must feel for Eiko. After all, Eiko was a dragon, while Blake was human. One day, Blake might fall in love with a woman, marry her, and start a family. Hearing that possibility made Eiko anxious, and she ran off without another word. At the same time, Blake was feeling bored. He wondered whether men were also expected to dress extravagantly for a dance party. Suddenly, Sylvia knocked on his door and asked to come in. They sat together on the bed, and Blake felt nervous. It was the first time he had ever sat on a bed alone with her. He grew even more flustered when he noticed her cheeks turning red. Blake asked whether she had finished getting her dress fitted. Sylvia explained that her gown was being adjusted because it had started to feel tight around the chest area recently. She thought Blake might be teasing her, but he quickly apologized. Then he asked if something had been troubling her. Sylvia revealed her suspicions about Milhouse as possibly being Julius. There were many clues that convinced her. Her father had been acting strangely. Mordred's ashes had been stolen. Milhouse had said suspicious things at the Grand Tomb of Willingham. And the first appearance of necromancia had also raised questions. The signs had been clear, yet she had only just realized it. Sylvia admitted she would be happy if Julius were still alive, but she did not know what to do. Blake shared a story about his own father, who had suddenly left after his younger sister was born. After that, no one in the house was allowed to talk about him. One day, Blake asked his mother about his father. She did not answer directly, but she promised she would explain everything once he was old enough to truly understand. Eventually, Blake learned to accept it. He suggested that instead of worrying endlessly, Sylvia should confront the truth herself. If she wanted answers, she should capture Milhouse and ask him directly. Sylvia agreed. She felt that following Blake's advice might make her life easier. She thanked him, and they exchanged shy glances, both blushing. Suddenly, thunder roared outside. The loud crack startled Sylvia. She cried out and instinctively grabbed Blake, causing both of them to lose their balance and fall to the floor. Blake's face turned red as he looked at her frightened expression. Soon after, heavy rain began to pour. Blake asked if she was okay and suggested she move somewhere safer, but Sylvia, still startled by the thunder, held on to him tightly, and they lost their balance again. For a brief moment, they found themselves extremely close, their faces only inches apart. Blake quickly reminded himself to stay calm and respectful. The girl in front of him was Sylvia, the fourth daughter of the House of La Tremont. Just as the atmosphere grew tense, a knock on the door interrupted them. Cosette informed them that Sylvia's dress adjustments were finished. Sylvia immediately left Blake's room. That night, the rain only grew heavier. Blake began to wonder why Aiko had not returned yet. Outside, Aiko was running alone in the rain. She felt heartbroken thinking about the future. One day, Blake might fall in love, get married, and have children. She tripped and fell, realizing once again the huge difference between them. She was a dragon, and Blake was human. The reality made her cry. Blake continued searching for Aiko as the dance party drew closer. Cosette approached him and asked whether he was looking for something. After running for quite a while, Aiko realized she might be lost. That was when she noticed Anya nearby, along with her subordinates, who seemed to be arranging some kind of strategy. Suddenly, Primrose's voice called out for Aiko. Hearing that, Anya and her group quickly prepared themselves, raising their weapons in alert. Aiko grew worried for Primrose's safety and shouted for her to lead immediately. Back then, Blake told Cosette that Aiko had disappeared and Primrose still had not found her. Cosette suggested that Blake should just attend the party, since the Fontaine maids knew every corner of the palace by heart. She was confident they would be able to track Aiko down. Trusting her, Blake headed straight to the ballroom. The dance floor was already packed with invited guests, yet Blake could not stop worrying about Aiko. Not long after, Sylvia approached him. She had already heard about Aiko and Primrose, and she believed they would definitely be found since Cosette was personally handling it. Suddenly, Blake noticed Milhouse. He wondered why Milhouse was there. Klaus, who stood nearby, asked what business Blake had with Milhouse, who was acting under Klaus's authority. Milhouse calmly implied that Blake might have mistaken him for someone else. Shortly after, Milhouse and Klaus walked away. Blake was about to stop them, but Sylvia held him back. She explained that Klaus was a noble representing the Zephyros Empire at that year's Intercontinental Congress. At the same time, Anya was cleaning herself up, reflecting on the earlier incident. When Primrose had approached Aiko, Aiko had urged her to run. Anya's subordinates chased after Primrose, but Aiko stepped in to protect her and managed to overpower them. After that, Aiko rushed toward Anya, and Anya fired at her. Anya could not shake the uneasy feeling that her own actions had caused Aiko harm. That night, the ball continued smoothly. Couples moved gracefully across the dance floor. Sylvia asked Blake not to keep staring at Milhouse. She believed Klaus and Milhouse would not do anything reckless, especially since they were official representatives of the Empire. Sylvia also noticed that Blake's dance steps were a little messy. Blake admitted that he only knew the basics. Sylvia smiled and thanked him for listening to her earlier, saying that talking to him had made her feel relieved. Still, she reminded him not to misunderstand her feelings. Meanwhile, the maids continued searching for Primrose and Aiko, but had not found them anywhere inside the palace. After dancing, Blake and Sylvia sat together. Blake admitted that he had been extremely nervous earlier. Not long after, Klaus approached them. He invited Sylvia to dance with him, but Sylvia expressed her preference to dance with Milhouse instead. Outside the palace, Cosette and the others expanded their search. Cosette found bloodstains on the ground, and soon after, they discovered Primrose unconscious. Inside the ballroom, Sylvia danced with Milhouse. Everyone watched them, captivated by how elegant their performance looked. While dancing, Sylvia wondered if Milhouse was actually Julius, since only Julius used to call her by the nickname Sylvie. She also questioned whether the necromantia that had appeared in the plaza was Mordrad. When Milhouse remained silent, Sylvia pressed him for an answer. Mildhose deflected by questioning whether such topics were appropriate to discuss while dancing in the Land of Nights. After the dance ended, Blake quickly approached Sylvia to ask about Mildhose, but she still had not received any clear answers. She mentioned that Mildhose's dancing style felt exactly like someone from the Nightly Kingdom. Not long after, Cosette arrived and informed Sylvia and Blake that Primrose had been found. They immediately went to see Primrose, who had regained consciousness. Primrose apologized to Blake because earlier she had told Aiko that Blake was human while Aiko was a dragon, and that one day Blake might fall in love with a human girl, get married, and have children. Primrose believed those words had hurt Aiko deeply. Hearing that, Sylvia scolded her. She explained that even though Aiko was a dragon, her heart was still that of a young girl. Sylvia admitted that if she were in Aiko's position, she would probably worry about the same things. She was clearly upset, though Primrose continued apologizing. Blake eventually asked Sylvia to stop reprimanding her. Cosette then shared that Primrose had revealed Aiko was kidnapped and taken to the old palace ruins. Blake was shocked and asked about the kidnapper's appearance. Primrose described them as looking like palace personnel, but their leader resembled a girl from Tantalos. Hearing this, Blake became convinced that Mildhose was behind everything. He wanted to confront Mildhose immediately, but Sylvia stopped him, saying it would be pointless. Cosette added that she had already searched every corner of the palace and found nothing. Sylvia believed Aiko would not be killed, yet she wondered where Aiko was being hidden during the party. They began to suspect that Aiko might be aboard Klaus's airship, Beowulf. Meanwhile, an experiment involving Yggdrasil was underway aboard Klaus's airship. Anya walked in to meet the professor leading the project, Hoffman. So far, the experiment had proceeded smoothly. The 11th compression beam was ready to be fired into the chamber containing Aiko. Workers hurried into position and began counting down before activating the beam. Aiko lay helpless inside the chamber. When the compression beam struck, she groaned in pain. Anya watched the process anxiously. Hoffman explained that with Millennium as the power source, they were firing a highly concentrated mana compression beam. The Yggdrasil device was designed to forcibly awaken an adult dragon form in those who could not become a maestro. Millennium itself was a mana-rich crystal formed from dragon fossils that were thousands of years old. By firing Millennium-powered energy at Aiko, they hoped to awaken her true form. As the beams continued, Aiko wondered if she would simply die there. The repeated blasts caused her intense pain. She silently wished for the experiment to stop. They had already injected Millennium energy 12 times, yet there was still no visible change. Hoffman then ordered that the Millennium output be increased to its maximum level. At the same time, Blake and Sylvia rode Lancelot through the sky, heading straight toward Klaus's airship. Inside the ship, Aiko's body was restrained by mechanical tentacles. She was in pain, silently hoping Blake would come and save her. In that moment, she could no longer feel the bond she shared with him. Aiko realized how foolish she had been, and the situation became a wake-up call that made her finally understand her true feelings for Blake. A maximum-level compression beam was fired into Aiko's chamber. Not long after, a massive explosion erupted. The Yggdrasil device activated and began flashing warning signals as its mana detection system picked up several unknown mana reactions. The emergency shutdown signal failed to respond, and another powerful blast shook the area, injuring several workers nearby. Anya urged Hoffman to shut the machine down before things spiraled further out of control. However, Hoffman explained that it was already too late. According to him, all the energy from the Millennium system had been completely absorbed into the subject's body. Moments later, the containment tube shattered. Aiko's body rose into the air, suspended as an enormous Saikoku mark formed around her, glowing intensely. Meanwhile, Blake noticed unusual activity happening around Klaus's airship. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his arm. The Saikoku engraved there began to glow so intensely that it scorched through his sleeve. Sylvia panicked and tried to understand what was happening. Blake did not know the exact cause, but he was absolutely certain that something had happened to Aiko. Then, without warning, a brilliant beam of light shot upward into the sky. It expanded and formed a gigantic, egg-shaped shell surrounded by a massive Saikoku pattern. Blake and Sylvia could only stare in awe at the overwhelming sight. Deep down, Blake began to wonder if Aiko was inside that mysterious shell.